Please welcome the CEO of Amazon Web Services, Andy Jassy.
Thank you, and welcome to the 9th annual AWS reInvent and the first virtual one. Now, I think we all wish we were together in Las Vegas right now, but we got the next best thing. We're live, so I'm really excited to be with you. I'm going to share a few words about reInvent. It's a little bit different this year. So one thing that's similar is we have a lot of people congregated. We have well over 400,000 people who've already registered for reInvent. We'll be at 500,000 by the end of the week. And this year is going to be different than prior years. reInvent is going to be over 3 weeks instead of 1 week. And then we have 5 keynotes. So the one you have today, Thursday there will be a partner keynote. Next Tuesday will be our first ever machine learning keynote with Swami. The next Thursday you'll have Peter DeSantis telling you more about our infrastructure. And then Werner will do the anchor keynote the 3rd week. So we got a lot in store for you. As always, reInvent is first and foremost an education and learning conference. And this year will be no different. We have well over 500 technical sessions. And while I think we'd all like to be together, I think one nice part about it being virtual is that you don't have that session collision that you sometimes have, where there are 2 sessions you want to go to at the same time or you have to travel. They'll all be online. Some will be scheduled. Most of them will be on demand. So it'll be much easier for you to see everything you want. A lot for you. So I'm going to give a quick update, but before I do, I just want to acknowledge what an unbelievably crazy last year it's been, particularly the last 9 months. And COVID has been so difficult for so many people. We've had so many people pass away. We've had so many people lose their jobs. So many businesses are struggling. It's just been really difficult. And I think if you live in the United States, it's also pretty hard to not be struck by the murders of Ahmaud Arbery and Breonna Taylor and George Floyd and realize the sobering thought that we have so far to go in this country in how we treat black people. I think the reality is for the last several hundred years, the way we treated black people in this country is disgraceful and something that has to change. We're working on it at Amazon. I know a lot of companies are, but I think the important thing for us all to realize is that this does not get solved in a few months. It can't be something that we work on for a few months and then turn our attention elsewhere. It's going to take several years of us working together, but we need to do it. So a quick AWS update. The business is a $46 billion revenue run rate business in the last announcement that we made, growing 29% year over year. And I think it's also important to talk about that year over year rate because I think a lot of people sometimes get confused and they try to compare different companies' year over year growth rate. The year over year growth rate percentage only matters as it relates to the base revenue. So you can have a higher year over year growth rate but be growing at a much lower absolute rate if you have a much lower base of revenue. And so if you look at just AWS as an example, to grow to a $46 billion revenue run rate with 29% year over year growth, it meant we had to grow an incremental $10 billion in the last 12 months to get there. That is much larger than you'll see elsewhere in the cloud. I think another data point to give you an idea of how fast AWS is growing, it took us 123 months, a little over 10 years, to grow to a $10 billion business. Then it took us only 13 months to go from 10 to 20, or 23 months to go from 10 to 20 billion, 13 months to go from 20 to 30 billion, and then 12 months to go from 30 to 40 billion. So the rate of growth in AWS continues to accelerate. I thought this was also an interesting slide, which is this shows you the top enterprise IT companies out there 10 years ago based on revenue. And you can see on this list there are some companies that don't really exist anymore in this form, but you'll also see that AWS is nowhere to be seen in this list. And then if you fast forward just 10 years, in 2020, you can see that AWS is now the 5th largest enterprise IT company in the world, ahead of companies like SAP and Oracle. And of course, that growth is significantly driven by the growth of cloud computing in the infrastructure technology space. And I think that you can see that with what's happened during the pandemic. And in the short term, in the first 9 months or 10 months of this thing, virtually every company in the world, including Amazon, has tried to save money any way that they can. But what we've seen, and this happens a lot of times when you have a period of discontinuity like a pandemic, is that companies take a step back and they rethink what they're doing and what they want to stop doing. And one of the things that we've seen is that enterprises that we've been talking with for many years about moving to the cloud, where there's a lot of discussion and dipping the toes in the water, but not real movement, so many of those enterprises have gone from talking to having a real plan. And that, I think, is going to be one of the biggest changes you see. I think when you look back on the history of the cloud, it will turn out that the pandemic accelerated cloud adoption by several years. It's really hard to build a business that sustains for a long period of time. Really, really hard. And this is a metric that I think is interesting. If you look at the Fortune 500, just 50 years ago in 1970, you can see that only 83 companies, or 17% of them, are still in the Fortune 500. If you look at just 20 years ago, the 2000 Fortune 500, only half of them are still in that list. It is really hard to build a business that lasts successfully for many years. And to do it, you're going to have to reinvent yourself. And often you're going to have to reinvent yourself multiple times over. And so in the last 9 months, I've thought a lot about reinvention and what it takes to do reinvention well. And typically what you see is the desperate kind of reinvention. You see companies that are on the verge of falling apart or going bankrupt, deciding they have to reinvent themselves. And when you wait to that point, it's a crapshoot whether you're going to be successful or not. It's a little bit like borrowing money. Everyone will tell you that you don't want to have to be borrowing money when the business is in bad shape, because you may not get the rate you want, or you may not get money at all. You want to be reinventing when you're healthy. You want to be reinventing all the time. And so we thought about what are the keys to reinvention, and some of it is building the right reinvention culture, and some of it is knowing what technology is available to you and jumping on it to make that reinvention happen. So I thought I would share with you today what we see as some of the keys to building that reinvention culture, and then some of the things that we see being reinvented as we speak. So what does it take to reinvent? And I'm going to list 8 keys that I think are important if you want to build the right reinvention culture. And the first is that you have to have the leadership will to invent and reinvent. And those terms sometimes, they're a little different. They're also similar. If you think about it, people often say invention is inventing a new product or service from whole cloth, and reinvention is reimagining an existing concept. But if you're going to reinvent and reimagine, there's a load of invention in there. Just look at what Airbnb has done in the hospitality space, or what Peloton has done in the exercise bicycle space, or look at what Stripe has done in the payment space. These are huge amounts of invention that has gone into these reimagining these spaces. And so if you're going to be a leader that's going to reinvent, you have got to be maniacal and relentless and tenacious about getting to the truth. You have to know what competitors are doing in your space. You have to know what your customers think about your product and where you sit, relatively speaking. You have to know what's working and what's not working. And you will always have a lot of people inside the company who will try and obfuscate that data from you. Sometimes they think they're doing you a favor, and sometimes it's for self-preservation reasons. But it's hard to get at that data, and you have to be relentless about it. You have to challenge people, often people who know a lot more about a subject than you do, but you've got to get to the truth. And then when you realize that there's something you have to reinvent and change, you have to have the courage to pick the company up and force them to change and move. And part of that is sometimes acknowledging that you can't fight gravity. If you step back and have conviction that something is going to change because it's a better experience for customers, it is going to change. Whether you want it to or not, whether it's convenient for you or not, it is going to change. And there are a lot of examples of this. I think if you look at what Reed Hastings and Netflix did several years ago, where they cannibalized their own DVD rental business because they saw where it was headed with streaming, I think that turned out to be a pretty good decision for them. I think if you look at Amazon in the late 90s, we had this owned inventory retail business, which meant we bought all this product from publishers and from distributors. We stored them in our warehouses, and then we shipped them to customers. And what we started seeing was these companies like eBay and Half.com that were actually offering third-party sellers products, and they were shipping the products to customers. And we had this huge animated debate inside the company on whether or not we should support that. And the reasons that we were concerned about it were we just didn't believe anybody was going to take care of customers the same way that we did. And then also the whole culture was set up to be this owned inventory business. People worried, well, if we worked with third-party sellers, how would our publishers or distributors feel? So it was a very hard decision. But ultimately, we decided to build a marketplace and offer third-party sellers. And we did it because we know that you cannot fight gravity. It was better for customers. It provided them better selection, and it gave them more assortment on price. Now, that also turned out to be a good decision for us because we sell more than half of our retail products through third-party sellers. But you've got to realize that if something's going to happen, it is going to happen regardless whether you want it to or not. You're much better off cannibalizing yourself than having someone do it to you and chasing it. The third thing you got to make sure of is that you have talent that's hungry to invent. Now, this seems fairly obvious. Everybody says, I have talent that wants to invent. But it's not always true. A lot of people who've been at the company for a long time are very comfortable doing things the way they've been doing them for a long time. Have you ever noticed it's often when you have new blood in the company that they're leading the transformation? And that's not because existing people can't lead reinvention. It's just that you're asking them to reinvent something they built. It's hard to rip up something you spent a lot of time and energy and dedication doing. And it means you got to learn new skills, and it means that you got to actually be curious about getting trained on other technologies. Sometimes that's true, sometimes that's not true. I'll tell you a quick story. There's a CIO in a pharma life sciences company that I've known a long time. I have a huge amount of respect for him. And I went to see him a few years ago, and I was talking to him for about 30 minutes about why I thought they should be using the cloud more meaningfully. They were barely using the cloud at that point. And he listened to me, and when I was done, he said, look, I agree with everything you just said, Andy. I agree that we could be inventing at a much faster clip. But that will be the job of the next CIO. It will not happen on my watch. And that's what happened. It took him a year or two. He retired. They hired a new CIO. That CIO said, what are we doing? And they've significantly moved to AWS in the cloud. But they lost 2, 3, 4 years of inventing on behalf of their customers. And you have to make sure that you've got builders who are curious about learning, who are excited about leaning forward and inventing and reinventing their customer experience. Now, you want builders and talent that's hungry to invent, but you want to make sure you guard against the opposite, which is that you have people who actually solve problems that you want people to solve problems for customers as opposed to solving problems because they like the technology and they think it's cool. And you see this a fair bit. You know, if you look in the enterprise technology space, there are some providers who are competitor focused. They look at what their competitors are doing and they try to fast follow and one-up them. We have a competitor like that across the lake from us here in Washington. Then you have a number of other providers who are product focused. And they say, look, it's great that you have an idea on the product, Mr. and Mrs. Customer, but leave that to the experts. And that's the group that you got to be careful about because they often are building things that they think are cool as opposed to what really solves the problems for customers. At AWS, we're customer focused. What we build is driven by what you tell us matters to you. And even if you can't articulate a feature, we'll try to read between the lines, understand what you're trying to build, and invent on your behalf. And so if you think about over the years of AWS, we have built a lot of technology that we believe is pretty cool, you know, pretty groundbreaking stuff. S3 and EC2 and RDS and Aurora and SageMaker and Redshift, I mean, a whole host of technology. But we never built it because we thought it was cool. We built it because we knew it would enable you to build new experiences and change your business. You've got to make sure that your scarce resource of engineers are working on problems that really matter to your customers. The fifth thing is speed. Speed disproportionately matters at every stage of your business and in every sized company. And I think that a number of leaders at enterprises have resigned themselves that they have to move slowly. It's just the nature of how big they are. It's the nature of their culture. They have engineering teams that tell them, hey, look, this is too risky, this is too big a lift. Sometimes you control those teams into trying something, and the first sign of a problem, they throw up their arms and say, see. Speed is not preordained. Speed is a choice. You can make this choice, and you've got to set up a culture that has urgency and that actually wants to experiment. Because you can't flip a switch and suddenly get speed. It doesn't work like that. You've got to build muscle to get speed. You've got to be doing it all the time. And there is going to be a time. Frankly, I think that time is happening right now and happens a lot more frequently than most companies realize. But there is going to be seminal moments where if you don't have the ability to have speed, you will not be able to reinvent when you need to. Now, one of the enemies of speed is complexity. And you have to make sure that you don't over-complexify what you're doing. When companies decide to make transformations and big shifts, a huge plethora of companies descend on them and providers descend on them and tell them all the ways that you got to use their products. You need to use us for this, even if you're using these people for these 3 things, use us for these 2. This company says use us for this. They don't deal with the complexity that you have to deal with in managing all those different technologies and capabilities. The reality is, for companies that are making big transformations and shifts, it is much easier to be successful if you predominantly choose a partner and you learn how to do it and you get momentum and you get success and you get real results for the company. Then later on, if you want to layer on complexity and more providers, you should go for it. But it's not a great way to start a reinvention to have too much complexity up front. And then one of the ways to help you avoid some of that complexity is making sure that you use the platform that has the most capabilities and the broadest set of tools. Now, I have played around the golf with somebody who used a 5-iron for every shot in the round. It's doable. It was not pretty, and it was not very effective either. I don't recommend it. And when you think about the cloud, because all the services you only pay for as you consume them. You don't pay for it up front. Why would you possibly go with a platform that has a fraction of the functionality of the leader? If you go with the platform that has the most capabilities and gives you the right tools for the job you need to do, it not only makes it easier for you to migrate all your existing applications, but also to enable your builders to build anything they can imagine. And there's nobody who is close to the capabilities across the cloud infrastructure technology platform as AWS. And you can see that whether you're talking about compute or storage or database or analytics or machine learning or the edge or IoT or robotics, in every one of these categories, you get a lot more functionality in AWS than anywhere else. The 8th key is something that really wraps all of this together, which is that the leadership team has to build aggressive top-down goals that force the organization to move faster than it organically otherwise would. And there are lots of examples of this. I like to talk about GE, where about 10 years ago, their CIO decided that they were going to move 50 applications to AWS in 30 days. And her entire team told her what a terrible idea this was. And she listened to them and she said, we're doing it anyway. They got to about 42 in 30 days. But in the process, they figured out their security and governance model. They figured out how to operate in the cloud. And they had success, which built momentum. And the ideas came flowing in, such that she could set that second big top-down goal to move 9,000 applications to AWS in a few years. Capital One did the same thing, where they set this big, audacious goal top-down that they were going to reinvent their consumer digital banking platform on AWS. And then that was on their way to moving everything to the cloud in AWS. Setting an aggressive top-down goal forces the organization to understand that they are not going to be able to dip their toe in the water for a number of years, that you mean business and you're going to make this change. And setting up the right mechanisms to inspect whether you're getting the right progress, and if not, getting the issues on the table so you can solve them is really important. Now, you'll notice that most of these keys, all these keys really, except for maybe one I mentioned, are not technical. They're really about leadership. And so you've got to make sure that you embrace these types of keys to build a reinvention culture like you can. It's very doable, but you have to embrace them. My first speaker today has embraced these keys, and it's really remarkable to see how she's led her company to start reinventing on top of AWS. It's my privilege to welcome to the stage the CIO of JP Morgan Chase, Lori Beer.
Thanks, Andy. It's great to be here. JP Morgan Chase serves customers and clients from around the world. from individuals and their local communities to corporations and governments. We have an over 200-year history built on trust, a foundation that allows us to build simple and intuitive experiences. Those solutions, which are increasingly technologically driven, represent the complete spectrum of financial services, from lending to banking, markets to advisory, and everything in between. And everything we do at tremendous scale. We have $28 trillion in assets under custody and process $6 trillion of payments daily. Through our consumer and community bank, we have a relationship with 50% of US households. And we serve 54 million active digital customers. We have long realized that while our relationships and financial expertise are paramount, it is technology that continues to help us differentiate. With a 200-year history, we've been dealing with technological change since the time of Thomas Edison, literally. The firm financed Edison's efforts to invent the first light bulb, and our former Wall Street headquarters was the first office in Manhattan to draw on Edison electricity. We were the first bank to offer ATMs, and our industry embraced early enterprise computing to process transactions. We were quick to offer online banking services during the rise of the internet, and our industry is increasingly driven by mobile computing today. Simply put, we've been reinventing the financial services industry for decades. But it's different today. The pace of change has accelerated. Innovation more rapid, and cloud platforms are disrupting business models daily. So we decided to completely rethink our environment, to embrace a true modernization effort across 250,000 employees, 35,000 developers, 6,000 applications, and 450 petabytes of data. We asked ourselves, how do we leverage our history of innovation and institutional know-how in order to evolve our business for today's technology revolution? We set the direction at the top of the house with business and technology leadership agreeing on a key vision. We will have the best tech talent, we will own our destiny in a hybrid cloud world, and we will work with leading technology companies like AWS to deliver unique innovation. We're in the midst of a truly one-of-a-kind transformation, leveraging AWS and modern engineering practices like refactoring our applications to be cloud native, leveraging more advanced AI and analytics than we ever have before, and doing all of this securely. AWS is helping us along this journey. We've benefited from their breadth of services and capabilities, understanding of the enterprise, and willingness to innovate and collaborate on key strategic initiatives. We work together on a unique approach, holding actual hackathons with AWS and JPMorgan Chase engineers to decompose applications and migrate workloads. This process helped us uncover problems, gain institutional knowledge, and enhance our collaboration. We then developed repeatable blueprints, helping developers architect modern applications in safe, repeatable environments using the depth of AWS services. We are a systemically important institution, serving clients through some of the most turbulent events in history. Working with AWS allows us to scale massive volumes, like Amazon EMR for trading analytics, or AWS Lambda and Amazon Elastic Kubernetes services for risk calculations, so we can innovate to stay ahead of our competitors. Transforming yourself takes a lot of work, but we are creating paved ways for developers and accelerating adoption. Our developer community is now innovating at scale using AWS. And we continue to migrate critical workloads that can take advantage of the unique capabilities of the platform. How can we transform our business through AI and better analytics? As I mentioned earlier, We have customer relationships with half of all U.S. households. The scale of our reach provides an opportunity to use analytics to better service them. To do that, we need a modern AI platform that was secure and one that enabled rapid experimentation. That's why we built our firm-wide AI platform, OmniAI, on AWS using Amazon SageMaker for machine learning. SageMaker has helped us create a platform to rapidly test and train machine learning algorithms, enabling us to run more experiments with more data. These are real use cases providing real value. As I speak, our data scientists are leveraging our OmniAI platform to develop new capabilities. For example, incorporating natural language processing to make client interactions more personalized, testing advanced machine learning models to have a more comprehensive view of risk, and performing real-time coaching and recommendations for call center agents so they can better serve customers. We use SageMaker across the model development lifecycle, from data labeling to model selection to experimentation and model serving. Our success with model development on AWS has influenced our data management strategy. We're now investing in cloud data warehousing technology with Amazon Redshift to more effectively scale our analytic capabilities in a modern environment. The combination of a scalable AI platform and AWS's elastic compute environments will help us accelerate our efforts to infuse analytics in everything we do. I'll close with what I started with. We are a business of trust. Everything we do is for the benefit of our customers and clients, and we deliver new innovations in a safe and secure manner. This is why we devote significant resources and collaborate with AWS to protect and continuously improve the security of our systems. Our adoption of cloud technology is already paying off. We're more agile, we're more secure, and we're more efficient. And through this journey, we will work with AWS to reinvent ourselves and build financial services of the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Laurie. It is really an honor for us to work with JPMorgan Chase. The partnership has come a long way, and we've just gotten started with respect to what we could do together. So thank you very much. So I mentioned earlier that when we think about the key to reinventing, it's a combination of building the right reinvention culture and then also having a set of technologies that you know are available to you that you jump on to use to reinvent. So I thought I would spend some time talking with you now about some of the areas that we believe are actively being reinvented that will allow you to do this reinvention. And at the beginning of each of these sections, I'm going to ask a customer to say a few words about what they think about this particular area. And we're going to start with the SVP of Engineering at Snap, Jerry Hunter, who will talk about compute.
All right, we're going to try and shoot this on Snap. I remember when we first started doing compute, that was the biggest thing to hit tech. It disrupted so many parts of the industry, and I really enjoyed being a part of it. Joining Snap, where the company is cloud native and taking advantage of every innovation, including things like Graviton2 and serverless. Every time a new innovation comes out, we're one of the first to adopt it because it lowers costs and improves performance. You might think that there isn't much left to reinvent when it comes to compute, but the innovations just keep coming.
Thanks, Jerry. We really appreciate the partnership with Snap, and we appreciate your continuing to move to AWS. And Jerry knows what he's talking about as it relates to compute. He spent a lot of time at Sun in the early years, and then he was at AWS, where he ran infrastructure, which are our data centers and our network and our hardware, before going to Snap to run their engineering. So he's kind of seen the rise and change in compute. And he's absolutely right that compute is continuing to be reinvented as we speak. There's three major modes of compute that we see. Instances, which is the traditional way that people have run compute, particularly when they want to get at all the resources on a box for their application. And then smaller units of compute, like containers, where people build in these smaller microservices because it lets them move faster and be more portable. And then event-driven serverless computing, when they don't want to worry about servers or clusters at all. And these three modes of compute are here to stay. They're going to be here for a long period of time. Let's start with instances. If you look at Amazon EC2, which is our service that vends instances to you, we not only have the broadest array of instances, but we also have the most powerful instances within those families. These are things like the fastest networking instances, where we have 100 gigabits per second in all our recent generations and up to 400 gigabytes per second in our P4Ds. We have the largest high memory instances at 24 terabytes for SAP use cases in our high memory instances. We have the largest local storage instances with our D3EN instances, which are launched today with up to 336 terabytes. We have the most powerful machine learning training instances with our P4Ds. We have the most powerful machine learning inference instances with our Inf1 instances. We have the best price performance graphics instances with our G4AD instances, which are coming in a week. We're the only ones who give you a Mac OS instance type, which we just launched last night with our Mac OS EC2 instances, that lets Apple's millions of developers now leverage the cloud much more easily. We're the only provider that gives you the ability to run instances with Intel, AMD, and ARM chips. It's a very different set of capabilities than anybody else has. And we're also iterating and innovating in a much faster clip. And people often ask us, they say, well, how are you innovating at such a rapid clip right now? And there are really two reasons. The first is what we've done with something called Nitro. We spent 5 years rebuilding our virtualization layer and our compute platform, and we launched it in 2017. What we did with Nitro was we took the virtualization of the security, networking, and storage off of the main server chip, and we put that on their own Nitro chips. And what that did for customers was it meant that you got all of the CPU to run your instances, so you get performance that's indistinguishable from bare metal, but at a lower price. And it also meant you got a stronger security posture, because it used to be that when you had to troubleshoot VMs, you had to worry about whether somebody would do something to the main server with your instances, but because the security now is on that separate Nitro chip, you don't have to worry about that. What it did for us was, because we broke out a bunch of those pieces into separable cards or chips, it meant we didn't have to make changes in making all of these different things change and evolve in lockstep, which allows us to innovate at a much faster clip. Now, what that means for you is that you get instances now, instead of every 2 to 3 years, you get innovative, brand new, change the game types of instances in months. That's a big difference. The second thing that has happened that's allowed us to innovate at such a rapid clip is what we've done with chips. And we have a deep relationship with both Intel and AMD, and we will for the foreseeable future. However, we realized a few years ago that if we wanted to continue to push the envelope on price performance, which you have asked us to do, we knew we were going to have to develop some of our own chips. And so we acquired a company called Annapurna, who were sophisticated and very experienced chip designers and builders, and we put them to work. And we tried to pick chips that would allow you to get the most done and have the most impact for your business. And so what we started with was we started with generalized compute. And we had the team build a chip on top of ARM that we called Graviton. And so Graviton first manifested itself in these A1 instances we had. And they were really for scale-out workloads, things like web tier workloads and things of that sort. And people loved them. They used them a lot quicker than we ever imagined. And they said, gosh, if you would make the chip more powerful so we could use it for more of our workloads, that would really change the game for us. And so that's what the team did with their second version of the Graviton chip, which we call Graviton 2, which gives customers 40% better price performance than the most recent generations of the x86 processors from other providers. And those manifest themselves on C6G instances and M6G instances and R6G instances and T4G instances. 40% better price performance. That is a big deal. Think about what you can do for your business if you have 40% better price performance on your compute. And customers have loved this. We have a large number of customers who are already using it, from Nielsen to Netflix to Snap and Lyft and Nextroll. And we have announcing today a brand new Graviton 2 instance, which is going to be the C6GN instance, which is our compute-heavy and network-heavy instance with 100 gigabits per second that will be coming in the next week or two. We are not close to being done investing and inventing with Graviton. People are seeing a big difference. Let me give you a couple examples. Here's a company called Honeycomb.io, and this is a blog that they wrote. And Honeycomb.io is a company that offers a comprehensive debugging tool for development teams, and they moved over to the M6G instances. And you can see they're saving 40% on price performance for their compute and using a lot fewer instances than they were using before. Or if you look at Nextroll, which is a leader in digital advertising, they're saving 50% on price performance. This is a big deal. And so Graviton is saving people a lot of money, very excited about it. We have a lot more coming in this space. Then we asked ourselves, what else can we apply our chip team to that would solve problems that we know are big growth areas for customers? And what we looked at was machine learning. That's the other area that's growing unbelievably quickly. And what you often see with machine learning is that people talk about the training, because we're still in the relatively early stages of machine learning, so many people are just getting their models trained. And there's a lot of effort on machine learning training. But if you have models that work at scale, if you take, for instance, Alexa, where it's a big old machine learning model that we have to train periodically, but we're spitting out predictions and inferences by the millions every hour. And so it turns out that 90% of your cost is not in the training. It's in the inference or the predictions. And nobody was focused on trying to help customers save money and be more efficient there. So we built an inference-focused chip, which we announced last year at re:Invent, called Inferentia. And if you look at the number of customers using Inferentia, that also is really swelling. But it's interesting to see, if you want to take a big use case, just look at Alexa. Alexa today has moved 80% of their predictions to Inferentia. They're getting 30% better cost and 25% better latency than they got from their prior chip. That's a big deal. Now, while we've focused on inference, we haven't forgotten about machine learning training. And we continue to iterate there as well. Of course, we have these P4 instances, which are the most powerful machine learning training instances in the cloud. But people, understandably, still want to find ways to be more cost-effective when they're training models. So today, I have two announcements to share with you that aim to help there. The first is that we will offer next year, in the first half of the year, Habana Gaudi-based Amazon EC2 instances. And so this is a partnership between AWS and Intel, and it will use Gaudi accelerators that will provide 40% better price performance than the best performing GPU instances we have today. It will work with all the main machine learning frameworks, PyTorch, as well as TensorFlow, and it will be available in the first half of the year. Now, like with generalized compute, we know that if we want to keep pushing that price performance envelope on machine learning training, we're going to have to invest in our own chips as well. And so I'm excited to announce as well AWS Trainium, which is our machine learning chip that's custom designed by AWS to deliver the most cost-effective training in the cloud. So Trainium will be even more cost-effective than the Habana chip I mentioned. It'll support all the major frameworks, TensorFlow and PyTorch and MXNet. It lets you use the same Neuron SDK that our Inferentia customers use. So if you use Inferentia for inference, it'll be easy to also get going on our machine learning chip on Trainium. It'll be available both as an EC2 instance as well as in SageMaker, and that's coming the second half of 2021. So when you look at the unmatched array of instances that you have in AWS, coupled with the relentless innovation in chips and in the virtualization layer and the compute platform, you're now getting reinvented instances every few months instead of every few years, which is a big deal. Now, one of the things that's really interesting that we've seen in the last several years is that people are moving to smaller and smaller units of compute. And what I mean there really are containers and serverless. And so I'll start with containers. People really love containers. It allows them to build in these smaller chunks of compute, which lets them move faster as well as be more portable. And if you look at the growth in containers in computing, it's pretty astounding. And the vast majority of it continues to run in the cloud on top of AWS. Of the containers that run in the cloud, about 2/3 run on AWS. And that's because while most other providers have one containers offering, typically a managed Kubernetes offering, AWS has 3. If it turns out that what you value most is using the open source Kubernetes framework, then we have our Elastic Kubernetes Service, EKS. If it turns out what you value most is having the deepest integration with the rest of the AWS platform, you use our Elastic Container Service, or ECS, which we can do because since we control it, we can make sure that everything launches integrated with ECS right from the get-go. If what you value most in containers is running containers without having to worry about servers or clusters, then you use AWS Fargate, which is our serverless container offering, which nobody else has anything like. And so one of the things that was interesting when we launched containers, and we launched these offerings, we wondered, once we had a managed Kubernetes service, would people use the other offerings? Or did Kubernetes have so much resonance that people would only use that? And what we found is that all 3 of these container offerings continues to grow like a weed, unbelievably fast. If you look at ECS, we have over 100,000 active customers using it. We have billions of compute hours on EKS run every week on AWS. And if you look at most of the net new container customers in AWS, start with Fargate because it's so easy to get going. And we actually have a lot of customers who use 2 or even 3 of these container offerings because different teams have different preferences and have different use cases. You want the right tool for the right job. You don't want one tool to rule the world because there are lots of different teams and preferences and use cases. So if you look at the problems that people who use containers are trying to solve today, they say, it's wonderful that you have these 3 offerings. It gives me so much more choice. I can use different offerings for different use cases. However, I still have a lot of my containers that I need to run on premises as I'm making this transition to the cloud. And so people really wanted to have the same management and deployment mechanisms that they have in AWS also on premises. And customers have asked us to work on this. And so I'm excited to announce 2 new things to you. The first is the announcement of Amazon ECS Anywhere, which lets you run ECS in your own data center. So ECS Anywhere allows you to have all the same AWS-style APIs and cluster configuration management pieces, and you can, on premises that you have in the cloud. So it makes it easy as you're making this transition to be able to run, if you're running ECS in AWS, you can run it on premises as well. It works with all of your on-premises infrastructure. So not surprisingly, when EKS customers hear that we've got ECS Anywhere, they say, well, what about Kubernetes? So I'm also excited to announce Amazon EKS Anywhere, which lets you run EKS in your own data center. So again, just like with ECS Anywhere, EKS Anywhere lets you run EKS in your data centers on premises alongside with what you're doing in AWS. It works again with all of your on-premises infrastructure. And it's interesting, when we've talked privately to customers about EKS Anywhere, they've been very excited. And they've said, well, I know that both ECS Anywhere and EKS Anywhere are coming in 2021, but I want to actually get started getting ready for EKS Anywhere. And so what we're also announcing today is that we're going to open source the EKS Kubernetes distribution to you so that you can start using that on premises. It'll be exactly the same as what we do with EKS. We'll make all the same patches and updates so you can actually be starting to transition as you get ready for EKS Anywhere. So I think our container customers are going to be excited by ECS and EKS Anywhere. But what we're also starting to see, in addition to huge amounts of containers growth and adoption, is that more and more customers are using event-driven serverless computing. And we pioneered this concept a few years ago with Lambda. And the problem that we were trying to solve was that we had some customers who said, look, I have certain workloads. When something happens, it triggers needing to spin up some compute, and that forces me to spin up EC2 instances and multiple availability zones for fault tolerance, and then they only really run these jobs for a few hundred milliseconds, but I have to leave them all up all the time because I don't know when the jobs are going to come in. And they wanted us to solve that problem. And that's why we built Lambda. Lambda lets you set a trigger with a few lines of code. It spins up compute. We spin it up for you. We spin it up in a fault-tolerant way, and then we spin it back down when you no longer are running jobs. And then we build you in increments of 100 milliseconds. By the way, I'm going to announce right now that we are changing that increment in which we're billing you from 100 milliseconds to 1 millisecond, which means for a number of these workloads, customers will be able to save up to 70%. Customers have really loved this event-driven computing model. They say, look, I love this. I don't want to actually just do it for these use cases where I spin up a little bit of compute. I actually would like to have my architecture for applications run that way. And so we started actually building other services that allowed you to run serverless end-to-end. These are services like API Gateway and Event Bridge and step functions. And then we added triggers in a lot of our AWS services so that you could actually trigger serverless actions from those services. We have them now in 140 AWS services, which is 7 times more than you'll find anywhere else. And just to give you a sense of the type of momentum that you're seeing with serverless right now, if you look inside Amazon and you look at all the new applications that were built in 2020, half of them are using Lambda as their compute engine. That's incredible growth. Hundreds of thousands of customers now are using Lambda. And so Lambda is growing really quickly. Serverless is growing really quickly. Containers are growing really quickly. And not surprisingly, a lot of customers are using both containers and serverless together. And they've said, I really wish that you would make it easier for us to run these 2 smaller units of compute together than you make it today. And they asked for a couple different things. The first thing they said was, look, our usage and adoption of containers is a little bit earlier than it is for serverless, in part because it looked a little bit more like instances and the tools were set up a little bit better than they were for serverless early on. But we're growing like gangbusters on serverless and Lambda. And so they said, look, we've invested so much time and energy into these container images that we deploy from. Why can't you just make it so we can deploy Lambda functions from these container images? So I'm excited to announce today the launch of Lambda Container Support, which lets you build Lambda-based applications using existing container development workflows. So now you can package code and dependencies as any Docker container image or any Open Container Initiative compatible container image, or really any third-party base container image or something that AWS has maintained as a base container image. It totally changes your ability to deploy Lambda functions along with the tools that you've invested in on containers. So I think customers are going to find this very handy. Another big challenge they asked us to try to help solve is this issue of trying to manage the deployment of these smaller units of compute, where you end up in these situations where you have all these microservices that have to be deployed together that comprise an application. And it's actually quite difficult to do. If you think about it, it's different than instances. With instances, typically you build it as a single block of code. You have code templates you use like CloudFormation to provision the infrastructure as code, or services like CodePipeline that do the CI/CD for you, or you do monitoring with CloudWatch. And once it's set up, it doesn't change that much. And code usually is maintained as kind of a single release, so it stays pretty coordinated. And there are tools today that make this pretty straightforward. But if you look at containers and serverless, These apps are assembled from a number of much smaller parts that together comprise an application. It's actually hard. You know, if you look at each of these microservices, they have their own code templates, they have their own CI/CD pipelines, they have their own monitoring, and most are maintained by separate teams, and it means that there's all these changes happening all the time from all these different teams, and it's quite difficult to coordinate these and keep them consistent, and impacts all sorts of things, including quality and security. And so there really isn't anything out there that helps customers manage this deployment challenge in a pervasive way. And so this is something that our team has thought a lot about, and I'm excited to announce the launch of AWS Proton, which is the first fully managed deployment service for container and serverless applications. So this is a game changer for managing the deployment of microservices. Here's how it works. A central platform team, or anybody central to an application, will build a stack. And a stack is really a file that includes templates that use code to define and configure AWS services used in a microservice, including identity and including monitoring. It also includes a CI/CD pipeline template that defines the compilation of the code and the testing and the deployment process. And then it also includes a Proton schema that indicates parameters for the developers that they can add, things like memory allocation or a Docker file or something like that. Basically everything that's needed to deploy a microservice except the actual application code. Then the platform, that central platform team, will publish the stack to the Proton console. Pretty often they're going to publish lots of stacks because there are so many different use cases for microservices. And then when a developer is ready to deploy their code, they'll pick the template that best suits their use case, plug in the parameters they want, and hit deploy. And Proton will do all the rest. It provisions the AWS services specified in the stack using the parameters provided. It pushes the code through the CI/CD pipeline that compiles and tests and deploys the code to AWS services, and then sets up all the monitoring and alarms. Proton also lists in the console all the downstream dependencies of a stack. So if the central engineering team makes some kind of change to that stack, they know all the downstream microservices teams that need to make those changes and can alert them and can track whether or not they made it. This is a game changer with regard to deploying containers and serverless apps. We're very excited about this, and I think our customers are going to be as well. So think about 10 years ago. If you flash back 10 years ago, the CPU and GPU providers effectively didn't have any competition, and it meant that you were able to get new instances every 2 to 3 years or so. Look at today. Look at what Graviton is doing with 40% better price performance on your most recent generations of x86 processors. It totally changes what you can get done compute-wise. Or look at what's happening with Inferentia or some of the machine learning training chips that I talked about earlier. You are going to get new instances that allow you to reinvent your business every few months now instead of every few years. 10 years ago, we weren't really talking very much about containers or serverless at all. Look how fast those are growing. And if you think about it, if you think about these container offerings and how many you have available in AWS and the ability now to be able to manage them the same way, both in AWS as well as on premises, and you think about what's happening with serverless, and you think about the tools now that are allowing you to use these new smaller units of compute and be able to deploy much more easily, there is an incredible amount of reinvention happening in compute. We are not close to being done reinventing in compute, so you can expect a lot more to come. Now, compute is obviously being reinvented, but so is data and data stores in a very big way. And to share some thoughts about what he's seeing in this space, and he has been there since the very start of the cloud, it's my pleasure to welcome the CEO and founder of SmugMug, Don McCaskill.
The launch of Amazon S3 in 2006 was a seminal moment for data storage. This invention totally changed our trajectory at SmugMug. Today, we use almost everything AWS has to offer. They've continued to add more and more data stores and analytics tools that have let us really pick the best tools for the best job to serve our customers. Tools like Athena, Redshift, Elasticsearch, Kinesis, and DynamoDB, which allows us to scale and serve photos at billions of requests per day. The cloud has totally reinvented how we store, secure, analyze, and share data at a scale that we couldn't have even imagined 14 years ago.
Thank you, Don. SmugMug was the very first big AWS customer. And I remember in the early days of AWS, this would have been March of 2006, shortly after we launched S3, basically our only salesperson at the time, Rudy Valdez, wrote us an email and he said, I just got a call from SmugMug and they're going to put 6 terabytes of data in S3. We said, wait, terabytes or gigabytes? He said, no, terabytes. We said, with a T or with a G? He said, no, with a T. We just couldn't believe it. But SmugMug and Don have seen the rise of the cloud and the change in data and data stores, and in fact, have been a big piece of informing what we've built. They've given us great feedback and really appreciate the partnership. And Don is correct in explaining that data and data stores is radically being reinvented as we speak. And if you think about it, today, with the way that the cloud has made storage so much less expensive and then compute to do something with that storage so much less expensive, it's astounding how much data is being created and stored today. Just a couple data points. Analysts say that in every hour today, we're creating more data than what we did in an entire year 20 years ago. Or they predict that in the next 3 years, there will be more data created than in the prior 30 years combined. This is an incredible amount of data growth. And the old tools and the old data stores that existed the last 20 to 30 years are not going to cut it to be able to handle this. Every single type of data store is being reinvented and will be reinvented multiple times over. Let me give you a few examples. Let's start with block storage. So if you look at block storage, it's a foundational and pervasive type of storage used in computing. Unlike object storage, which has metadata that governs the access and the classification of it, block storage has its storage or its data split into evenly sized blocks that just have an address and nothing else. And since it doesn't have that metadata, it means that the reads and the writes and access to them are much faster. And it's why people use block storage with virtually every EC2 use case. It's also why probably the very most animated debate that we had as an AWS team before we launched AWS was, could we launch EC2 with just direct attached storage that was ephemeral, or could we not launch EC2 until we had high performance block storage? And it was a very animated debate, lots of opinions, and we ultimately kind of figured out that it was going to take us 2 more years to build a high-performance block store, and we didn't want to wait to give you EC2, so we launched EC2 with just that direct attached storage. But we hustled like heck to get to building a block store, and we launched our Amazon Elastic Block Store, or EBS, in 2008. It was the first high-performance, scalable block store in the cloud, and it gave you an easy ability to provision what storage you needed and what IOPS you needed and what throughput you needed. And then you could adjust it as you saw fit. In 2014, we built the current version of our general purpose EBS volumes called GP2, which the vast majority of EBS workloads run on top of, every imaginable workload you can imagine. The feedback that we've gotten the last year or two from customers is that we love GP2, but if we had a wish list, there's a couple things that we'd like from you. We'd like one, of course, we'd like the cost per gigabyte to be less. And then we want to be able to sometimes scale throughput or scale IOPS without also having to scale the storage with it, which is what GP2 asks you to do. So the team has been working on this, and I'm excited to announce today the new version of our general purpose volumes, GP3, which allows you to have 20% better cost per gigabyte, as well as be able to provision IOPS and throughput separately from storage. So the baseline performance of these new GP3 volumes is 3,000 IOPS and 125 megabytes per second, but you can burst that and scale that up to a peak of 1,000 megabytes per second, which is 4 times that of GP2. And you'll see that customers will be able to run many more of their demanding workloads on GP3s than they even were for GP2s. Yet, there are certain types of use cases where you need a lot more IOPS than you get with GP3s. Clustered databases are a good example of this. And that's why we built our provisioned IOPS, or IO2 volumes for EBS, which give you 4 times the amount of IOPS of a GP3 volume. And you can, of course, if you start with GP3s and it turns out you think you need IO2s, you can use our elastic volumes feature to seamlessly move that volume. But it's also true, while people run their most demanding IOPS applications on top of IO2s, that there are still workloads that are even more demanding. Some of the most demanding Oracle databases or SAP HANA databases and offerings where people need in the neighborhood of 200,000 IOPS, or 3,000 to 4,000 megabytes per second of throughput. And it's true that you can stripe together a number of these IO2 volumes to give you more collective IOPS or throughput, but the more that you have to stripe together, the harder it is to manage and to keep consistent and to get the performance you want. And so what customers have said is, look, what you're forcing me to do for these most demanding workloads is you're forcing me to use these storage area networks, or SANs, which are really, they're a bunch of clustered disks with networking attached to them. And you're forcing me to run these SANs on premises. And I don't want to have to run these SANs because they're expensive. If you get a good deal on a SAN, it's about $100,000. But then when you factor in support and maintenance and maintaining it across multiple data centers, you get to $200,000 pretty quickly. And if it turns out you exceed the capacity of a SAN, you have to buy in an incremental increment of another couple $100,000. So people don't like the cost, but it's also hard to manage. You have to update and maintain the software. You have to do the same thing with the hardware. You have to manage it in data centers. You have to make sure it's fault tolerant. But customers have said, look, you've left me with no option because there is no SAN in the cloud until now. I'm excited to announce IO2 Block Express, which is the first SAN built for the cloud. So Block Express volumes give you up to 256,000 IOPS, 4,000 megabytes per second, and 64 terabytes of storage capacity. That's 4x the dimensions of the IO2s on every single one of those. That is massive for a single volume. Nobody has anything close to that in the cloud. And what it means is that you now get the performance of SANs in the cloud, but without the headaches around cost and management. You just spin up a Block Express volume, we manage it, and we'll back it up and maintain it for you. We'll replicate it across an AZ. You can use the EBS snapshot capability to auto lifecycle a policy to back it up to S3. And if you need more capacity, you just spin up another Block Express volume at a much lower cost than trying to do it at $200,000 a clip. So we will add additional SAN features in 2021, things like multi-attach and I/O fencing, and make elastic volumes work with it. And this is pretty exciting. There was a lot of very complicated, sophisticated, innovative engineering to give you Block Express, but it's a huge game changer for your most demanding applications that you want to run on EBS. So block stores are being reinvented. What about databases? Databases, as you all know, are right in the middle of every application. And they're hard to manage. You have to set them up, you have to tune them, you have to patch them, you have to make sure you get the right fault tolerance and performance. And it's why companies have so many database professionals that they have to hire. It's also why we built our relational database service, which is our managed relational database service, which we launched about 10 years ago and has been wildly popular. But if you look at, despite the growth of things like RDS, it's still true that the overwhelming majority of relational databases live on premises. And they live largely with these old guard commercial grade database providers named Oracle and Microsoft with SQL Server. And this is an unhappy place for customers. We've talked about this for several years. This is why you're seeing so much movement. But it's unhappy because those offerings are expensive, they're proprietary, they have high amounts of lock-in, and those companies have punitive licensing terms where they're willing to audit you, and if they find any discrepancy, they extract more money out of you. And these companies also have no qualms about changing the licensing terms midstream on you. You just look at what Microsoft did with SQL Server in the last year or two. They basically changed the terms so you can't use your SQL Server licenses anywhere but Microsoft's cloud. Is that good for customers? Hell no. Is that good for Microsoft? I think they think so. I think it's short-term thinking because our experience over the fullness of time is that customers flee companies the first chance they get when they feel like they're being abused. And this is something that customers are fed up with and they're sick of, and it's why they're moving as fast as they can to these open engines like MySQL and Postgres. But to get the type of performance you get in the commercial-grade databases in these open engines, you can do it, but it's hard work. We've done a lot of it at Amazon, and our customers asked us to fix that problem for them. And that's why we built Aurora. And Aurora has 100% compatible versions with MySQL and Postgres. It has several times better performance than those community-grade versions. It has at least the same fault tolerance and durability and availability as the commercial-grade databases, but at 1/10 of the cost. This is why customers have been flocking to Aurora as quickly as they have. It's the fastest growing service in the history of AWS. It has been since it's launched. And you see that we have over 100,000 customers now using Aurora. These are companies like Airbnb and AstraZeneca and BP and Capital One and Fannie Mae and Petco and Verizon and Volkswagen. One of the great things, though, about having a service that people love so much and that's growing so fast is that you get a lot of feedback on what else people would love you to build. And that is fuel for us. Please keep it coming. That is how we choose what to build. And a lot of our Aurora customers said, look, we love Aurora. If we had a big ask, it would be that we'd like to be able to run Aurora taking advantage of that serverless architecture where we didn't have to think about servers and clusters. And so that's why we built Aurora Serverless, which is really an auto configuration for Aurora, which allows you to set up an Aurora database, and then when you need to scale up because of capacity, we'll scale it up in 5 to 50 seconds, usually doubling the capacity each time you need more capacity. And we have thousands of customers who've been using Aurora Serverless primarily for dev and test workloads. And they said, look, we want to run that. We love it. We want to run it for production workloads, but we need some things from Aurora, but what we normally get from Aurora if we're going to do that. And they said, we need multi-AZ, we need read replicas, and then when we need to scale up capacity-wise, we need to happen instantaneously. We can't wait 5 to 50 seconds, and we only want to scale up in the precise increment that we need to scale up. So the team went away and started working on that this year, and I'm excited to announce the launch of Amazon Aurora Serverless v2, which allows you to scale to hundreds of thousands of transactions in a fraction of a second. And so Aurora Serverless v2 totally changes the game for you with serverless as it relates to Aurora. You can scale up as big as you need to instantaneously. It only scales you up in the precise increments that you need to. So if you're using Aurora Serverless v2, you can save up to 90% versus provisioning Aurora for the peak. It adds in a lot of the Aurora capabilities people want in multi-AZ and global database and read replicas and backtrack and parallel query. And it really makes Aurora Serverless v2 ideal for virtually every Aurora workload. MySQL is available for you now with Aurora Serverless v2, and Postgres will be available in the first half of 2021. Now I ask you, how many of these old guard commercial grade database companies would build something like Serverless v2 that's clearly going to take a meaningful amount of revenue away from their core database offering? I wouldn't hold your breath. I think the answer is none of them. They're just not built that way. But we have a different way of thinking about our business, which is that we're trying to build a set of relationships and a business that outlasts all of us. And the best way we know of doing that is listening to what customers care about. And if we can help you build more efficiently, more effectively, change your experience for the long term, even if it means short-term pain for us or less revenue for us, we're willing to do it because we're in this with you for the long haul. And I think that's one of the reasons why customers trust AWS in general and have trusted us in the database space over the last number of years. If you look at it, just in the last few years, we've had more than 350,000 databases migrate to AWS using our database migration service. And the pattern they usually follow is they say, look, we use a database migration service to move our database data. We use your schema conversion tool to convert the schema. But there's a third area that's making this harder than we wish it were, that we want your help with. And that's trying to figure out what to do with the application code that is tied to that proprietary database. And so customers have asked us, can you do something to make this easier for us? Because we want to move these workloads to Aurora. And especially with the way they've watched Microsoft get more punitive and more constrained and more aggressive with their licensing, they want help. So the team has been working on this for a little bit more than a year, and I'm excited to announce today the launch of Babelfish for Amazon Aurora Postgres, which lets you run SQL Server applications on Postgres, Aurora Postgres, with little to no code changes. So Babelfish is a new translation capability that lets you run SQL Server applications on Aurora Postgres. And what Babelfish does is it understands Microsoft SQL Server's T-SQL dialect. It creates a tabular data stream, or a TDS endpoint, for your app to connect to, and then it understands Microsoft's proprietary schemas. And what it means for you is that now you can use the database migration service to move your database data, the schema conversion tool to move your schema or convert your schema, and then you can use Babelfish to update your application configuration to point to Aurora Postgres instead of SQL Server, and you get to shed those expensive and constrained SQL Server licenses. Because Aurora now is able to understand both T-SQL and Postgres, you can write application functionality in Postgres to run side by side with your legacy SQL Server code. And so customers that we've spoken to privately about this, to say they're excited would be one of the more large understatements I could make. Very excited. And they were so excited about this that as we were preparing for reInvent and discussing it, we realized that this was probably bigger than just Aurora Postgres, that people really wanted the freedom to move away from these proprietary databases and to Postgres, which is where most people move from these. And so we decided that we're going to open source Babelfish. And so I'm excited to announce Babelfish for Postgres, which is an open source project. So Babelfish for Postgres will use the permissive Apache 2.0 license. It means that you can modify or tweak or distribute in whatever fashion you see fit. All the work and planning is going to be done on GitHub, so you have transparency of what's happening with the project. So this is a huge enabler for customers to move away from these frustrated, old guard proprietary databases to the open engines of Postgres. You can sign up for Babelfish for Aurora Postgres today, and then you'll be able to sign up for the open source project in 2021. So block stores are being reinvented. Relational databases are being reinvented. Heck, actually, all of databases are being reinvented. If you think about it, we've been talking about this for the last few years. That world that you lived in for 20 or 30 years, where you used a relational database for every single workload, that time has come and go. If you have data in volumes that are gigabytes and sometimes terabytes, you can get away with using a relational database for everything. It's not ideal, but you can get away with it. But in a world where you're now dealing with terabytes of data and petabytes of data and sometimes exabytes of data, a relational database doesn't make sense. It's too expensive, it's too complicated, and it doesn't perform as well as purpose-built databases that do a particular workload or use case extremely well. And that's what we've been working on the last several years. We have built 7 of these purpose-built databases, more than you'll find anywhere else by a fair amount, that allow you to have the right tool for the right job. So I'll give you some examples. If you're a company like Lyft and you have millions of geolocation and driver combinations, you don't want a relational database. It's too complex, it's too expensive, it's not performant. You want a high throughput, low latency key value store like DynamoDB. Or if you're a company like Peloton and you want to show your dashboards in microseconds, you want an in-memory database like Elasticache. Or if you're a company like Nike and you're trying to connect all these different graphs of information that have relationships attached to them, you want a graph database like Neptune. Or if you're doing work at the edge with IoT where the data is coming in a time stream format, you want a time series database called TimeStream, which we have. If you want to run managed Mongo, if you want to run managed Cassandra, you want those databases that allow you to have the right tool for the right job. I think you're seeing the same exact thing happening with purpose-built analytics stores. So if it turns out that you want to do querying directly on your data lake or an S3, you use Athena. If it turns out that you want to actually process vast amounts of unstructured data across dynamically scalable clusters using popular distributed frameworks like Spark or Hadoop or Presto, you use EMR. If you want to do large-scale analytics on log data for operations, you use our Elasticsearch service. If you want to do real-time processing of streaming data, you use Kinesis. And if you have structured data where you need super fast querying results, you want something like a data warehouse. You want Redshift, which was the first data warehouse built for the cloud, continues to be the largest data warehouse in the cloud, and they continue to innovate at a rapid rate. Last year at reInvent, you saw the RA3 instances, which separates storage from the compute, which people have loved. We're just around the corner from the general availability of Aqua, which moves the compute to the storage and will give you 10x better query capabilities in terms of speed than anywhere else. You want these purpose-built databases and these purpose-built analytics stores, and we see customers flocking to them. Now, it's actually brought up a really interesting challenge and question for customers, which is most companies either have a data lake or will build a data lake to take all that data from disparate silos and move it together so you have one place where you can do your analytics and your machine learning from. And most of those are built on S3. We have tens of thousands of data lakes built at S3, more than you'll find anywhere else because of the security and reliability and governance and compliance capabilities and the broad features and the flexible and cost-effective performance of S3. So you're going to have these data lakes that you centralize all your data so you can run analytics and machine learning from. But as we just talked about, you're increasingly seeing customers using more and more of these purpose-built data stores. And so customers say, well, I want my data to be able to move back and forth between these different stores because it's very useful to take some of these views that I have and use them in other spots. And while we have capabilities in many of these services that let people move them back and forth, it's really not easy enough for people to do such that they do it in a pervasive way. So customers really, really want more freedom for their data to move around. The team's worked on this for the better part of a year. I'm excited to announce today the launch of AWS Glue Elastic Views, which lets you easily build materialized views that automatically combine and replicate data across multiple data stores. So Glue is AWS's ETL service, and you can write SQL or you can use our Glue Studio Visual tool to do extracting and loading and orchestration. And we recently, a few weeks ago, launched something called Data Brew to make it easy to clean and normalize data with no coding. But Elastic Views is different. What it lets you do is it lets you write a little bit of SQL to create a virtual table or a materialized view of the data that you want to copy and move and combine from one source data store to a target data store. Well, in the old days, you'd have to figure out a way to write code and make sure you can get all the DynamoDB attributes and figure out how to move that and move it in sync, keep it up to date as the attributes changed and new ones came in or things got adjusted in any way. All of that muck is taken away by Elastic Views. And so what Elastic Views does is it allows you to set up a materialized view to copy that data and move that data from one of those source data stores to a target data store, and then it manages all of the dependencies of those steps as they move. And if something changes in the source data store, Elastic Views takes that and automatically changes it in the target store in seconds. If it turns out, for whatever reason, the data structure changes from one of the data stores, Elastic Views will alert the person that created the materialized view and allow them to adjust that. This is a huge game changer in being able to move data. It takes a lot of the work that people had to do, and frankly just found it so much work that they rarely did. You know, it's when you have the ability to move data, you know, to have purpose-built data stores and have a data lake, but to also move that data easily from data store to data store, there is a lot of power in giving that freedom of movement of data, and this is going to be a big game changer for customers having Elastic Views. Very excited to give it to you. A company that I think is doing one of the most revolutionary and transformational things around today, and that's also using data and computing in very innovative ways, is what's happening at a company called Boom, which is trying to build the first supersonic airplane in 60 years. And to share with you how they're doing that and what they're doing with data and compute on top of AWS, it's my pleasure to welcome the founder and CEO of Boom, Blake Scholl.
So what does a revolution in high-performance computing have to do with a revolution in high-performance aircraft? What does cloud computing have to do with how we fly through actual clouds? And why now is a software engineer building the next commercial aircraft company? Air travel is integral to our modern lives, yet aviation is a domain starving for step change innovation. The last big new thing was the jet airliner, invented more than 6 decades ago. Tokyo to Seattle has been a 9-hour flight for going on 60 years. At Boom, we are guided by one fundamental mission: to make the world dramatically more accessible. And by the end of the decade, millions of everyday travelers will enjoy the benefits of supersonic flight aboard Overture, an airliner twice as fast as any flying today. That means that Tokyo will be just 4.5 hours from Seattle, and London just 3.5 from New York. Speed unlocks new possibilities for human relationships and business connections. That's why major aerospace players such as Rolls-Royce, Japan Airlines, and the United States Air Force are among Boom's partners. All of this is possible thanks to advances in computing that enable a startup company to spark a revolution in speed. 20 years ago, I hit 2 life milestones as a new graduate. I started my first job here at Amazon as a software engineer, and I started taking flying lessons just a few miles down the street at Boeing Field. Around the same time, Amazon was building the fundamental web services that would later become AWS, charting a new future of computing across all industries. Little did I know that these things would intersect so powerfully in my future. I never could have predicted that the innovations in cloud computing happening at Amazon and AWS would fundamentally change how we all fly. Well, fast forward to today, and Boom is designing and building the world's fastest and most sustainable airliner. And we've just announced that we're going all in with AWS. Why? Well, it turns out that high-performance computing is key to this new era of airplane design. And AWS is the leading cloud provider, allowing us to leverage a wide range of capabilities and services. Plus, Amazon's relentless focus on the customer means that some of the best minds in cloud computing are helping Boom innovate and get to market faster. AWS levels the playing field in aerospace, allowing a startup company to develop what previously only big companies or governments could do. So this is how airplanes were designed before the age of computing. Engineers worked with drafting paper and slide rules. They built scale models to test in wind tunnels, leading to a process of iteration that was slow and costly. Today, to design faster airplanes, we need the fastest computers. And computational methods leveraging AWS save us literally years of schedule and millions of dollars. Moreover, because we can now test many designs quickly and inexpensively, we can deliver a better airplane. In October, we rolled out XB-1, history's first independently developed supersonic jet. And to design XB-1, we leveraged EC2 to stand up HPC clusters, often with more than 500 cores. Hundreds of possible airplane designs flew through virtual wind tunnel tests, encompassing thousands of flight scenarios. Because AWS allowed us to run many hundreds of these simulations concurrently, we achieved a 6-fold increase in team productivity. Simply put, without AWS, today we would be looking at a sketch of a future airplane concept, not an assembled jet, because years of design work would still remain. Since airplanes are amongst the most complex machines ever created by humanity, Boom will generate petabytes of data as we design and develop our Overture airliner. Already, we are transferring 525 terabytes of XB-1 design and test data to AWS. Because AWS lets us put compute next to data, we can run models across our data set, gaining actionable insights. For example, we're using machine learning to calibrate simulations to wind tunnel results, accelerating model convergence, and allowing us to deliver a more optimized aircraft. All in all, we've used 53 million core hours in AWS to design and test XB-1. And in the same manner, we expect to use over 100 million core hours as we finalize the design of our Overture airliner. Because our pursuit of speed is about making Earth more accessible, we're taking great care to build an environmentally and socially responsible supersonic jet. And I am proud that Overture will be 100% carbon neutral from day one, thanks to its use of alternative fuels, which means that supersonic flight is going to be more affordable than ever before. Well, great revolutions in fundamental technologies enable benefits that are difficult to predict or even imagine. Think of how many industries AWS has already transformed. And today, supersonic flight is one of those surprising benefits of computing. Just as AWS is reinventing computing, at Boom, we're reinventing travel. So what further breakthroughs will be sparked by a revolution in how we fly? At Boom, our vision is one of accessibility, of new possibilities unlocked in the world around us. By the end of the decade, your flights will be cut in half. So what will you do when Australia is as accessible as Hawaii is today, and your flight is completely carbon neutral? How might you transform an industry? What new people could you come to call friends? But Overture is merely the first step towards our vision of a supersonic future. Because I dream of a day where you can go anywhere in the world in 4 hours for just $100, where the fastest flight is also the most affordable. Boom is making supersonic flight mainstream, and AWS is helping us deliver on that promise. I am so excited to see what you will invent when more of the world is within your reach. Thank you.
Thank you, Blake. I'll tell you what I'm going to do when Australia is as accessible as Hawaii. I'm going to go to Australia more. It's incredible what Boom is doing. We often talk at Amazon about thinking big. That is thinking big. It's very impressive. It's very exciting. It could really change life for all of us. We're honored to be partnered with Boom. You know, I remember a time about 25 years ago or so, people thought that search was boring and there was really nothing left to invent. And I remember a time maybe 15 years ago where people felt like technology infrastructure was boring and there wasn't much left to invent. And those turned out to be wrong. And I think oftentimes people think of data stores and databases as being boring and what's there left to invent. And I hope you can see the answer's a lot. You see that block stores are being reinvented. You see that relational databases are being reinvented. You see that purpose-built data stores are being reinvented. And then the movement of that data between those stores that frees up the power of what you can build with elastic views. Huge amounts of reinvention happening with data stores. Now, hand in hand with data is what's been happening with machine learning and the adoption of it. And to start us off on this section, I'm going to transition it over to the CTO of Intuit, Mariana Tessel.
Intuit is an early adopter of AI, starting the journey over a decade ago. We see tremendous opportunity in applying AI to revolutionize our business and to benefit our customers. And given the potential, this is just the beginning. Working together with AWS, we developed a robust ML platform that empowers our engineers to incorporate AI into our products. We use AWS tools for model development, training, and hosting, and integrate our own capabilities for orchestration and feature engineering. This has been game-changing. Together with AWS, we made great strides in driving AI ML innovation with speed, helping us deliver smarter products faster to more than 50 million consumers, small businesses, and self-employed customers around the world.
Thank you, Mariana. It is really interesting. When we talked about earlier about being able to build a reinvention culture, Intuit has done that. And you can see it not only with how they have been more sophisticated and more lean forward with respect to using the cloud for their technology infrastructure, but also with respect to what they're doing with machine learning, where they're well ahead of most companies. So people have been talking about machine learning for over 20 years, and the cloud, with its cost structure around compute and then the amazing amount of capacity you have, has made machine learning much more practical. And while more and more companies, amazing progress, have started using machine learning, make no mistake about it, it is very early in the history of machine learning, and almost everything is continually being reinvented. There's loads of examples. I'll just give you one simple one here. So this is the top frameworks that have been used in new machine learning scientific publications in the last 5 years, which is often a leading indicator of what people use. And you heard us talk a few years ago when TensorFlow was so dominant in the frameworks used that the one constant we see in machine learning is change. And you can see that. Look at how PyTorch has caught TensorFlow over the last few years, because it's much easier to use and to get started with. And when we talk to machine learning practitioners, 90% of them tell us they use more than one framework, and 60% use more than two. And so clearly, you can see that machine learning is in the very early stages. Frameworks was one of the most stable things a few years ago, but you can see it's changing very substantially. Now, we have a lot more machine learning capability than anybody else by a fair bit, and it's one of the reasons why last year in my keynote, the section on machine learning was 75 minutes. I'm not going to do that this year. For the first time, we've broken out a machine learning keynote that Swami is going to do next Tuesday. I'm going to leave a lot of the goodies for him, but I have a few that I'm going to share, and I'm going to really frame them in the context of the asks we get from our machine learning customers. The first ask we get is they say, look, we want to have the right tools for our expert machine learning practitioners, and that typically involves chips and frameworks. And this is the group of people, by the way, who operate at that bottom layer of the machine learning stack. They're comfortable building and training and tuning and deploying machine learning models at scale. And we talked earlier about all the areas we're trying to help our expert machine learning practitioners with chips around inference and machine learning training. But I also think it's important to think about the frameworks. You know, we took an approach a few years ago where we said, we're going to support every single one of the major machine learning frameworks. And we built, that was a unique approach. Everybody else was just focused on TensorFlow. And what we did was we built separable teams. We have one team that's just focused on how to optimize TensorFlow in AWS, one team that's just optimized on how to run PyTorch in AWS, and one that's just focused on MXNet in AWS. And that's why you get the best performance in all those frameworks on AWS. I usually show you benchmarks at this point. I'm going to leave that to Swami for next week. But we believe that we're not done seeing new frameworks pop up that you're going to care about. And the commitment you have from us, almost dropped that, the commitment you have from us is that we will continue to support every single one of those major frameworks because we know that expert machine learning practitioners want the flexibility to build however they see fit. The second ask we get is, look, the reality is there aren't that many expert machine learning practitioners in the cloud. There aren't that many in the world. And those that exist tend to live at the big technology companies. So if we want machine learning to be as expansive as we all believe it should be, you've got to make it easier for everyday developers and data scientists to be able to use machine learning. And that's why we built, a few years ago, SageMaker, which sits at that middle layer of the machine learning stack. And SageMaker was a step-level change in the ease with which you can build, train, tune, and deploy a machine learning model. We have tens of thousands of customers who are standardizing on top of SageMaker and using it. And these are companies like 3M and ADP and Cerner and Intuit and GE and Snap and the NFL and T-Mobile and Vanguard, just a broad group. And one of the things that people like most about SageMaker is they see how quickly SageMaker is continuing to iterate. This is the second year in a row that the SageMaker team has added over 50 new features in the last 12 months. That's like one a week. That's really unusual. And we haven't stopped. If you think about last year at reInvent, I announced in my keynote the launch of SageMaker Studio, which was the first integrated development environment, or IDE, for machine learning. And we gave you notebooks, which were easy to create in one click and share, and debugger, which made it easy to debug your models, and experiments, which saved all the artifacts of your experiments so you can kind of figure out what happened and share them, and model monitors so you could tell if you had model drift, and autopilot, which looked at automatically what was in a CVS file and created a new model for you, machine learning model automatically with transparency and how it was created so you could pick it up when you were done seeing it if you wanted to evolve it yourself. That was a huge amount of new innovation last year, and customers have loved SageMaker Studio, and they're using it in a really expansive way. And what we often do, again, when we have services that have this amount of traction, we get a lot of gratuitous feedback from customers, which we love, but we also constantly ask customers, what else can we build for you that would make your life easier? And the topic that seems to come up first and foremost almost every time is how can you make doing data preparation for machine learning much easier? And data preparation is hard. If you think about it, to build a model, you've got to collect all of this data from different sources that come in different formats. None of it's normalized, which you need for the models. And when you're building these models, you need to look at all these different dimensions, what they call machine learning features. And if you want to, I'll take something like a real estate app. If you want to predict the prices of real estate, you need to look at features when you build a model like how many bedrooms or how many bathrooms or how many square feet is the house or what are other houses on that street selling for? Does it have a Starbucks within 5 miles? These are all features that you need that arrive in different formats that the model can't understand, where you have to convert these features into the right format that the model can understand. This is what is called feature engineering. And then there are also, by the way, times where you want to take two different features and combine them, or two or more different features and combine them. Take something like, in our real estate example, you want a house pricing index where you're combining different features that make the model more efficient. Converting these models, converting these features, combining features themselves, that type of feature engineering is really hard and takes a lot of time. You got to write queries and code to get all that data from various sources. You have to convert the data to the format the algorithms can use. You sometimes want to actually combine the features. You want to prototype these features to see if your feature engineering worked or not before you actually apply those transformations everywhere. And then you got to apply the transformations and make sure you don't have missing data or outliers. It's just a lot of work. And people have said there must be an easier way, which is why I'm excited to announce today the launch of Amazon SageMaker Data Wrangler, which is the fastest way to prepare data for machine learning. So Data Wrangler is a total game changer with respect to speed of doing machine learning data preparation. The way it works is you point Data Wrangler at the appropriate AWS data store or third-party data store, and then Data Wrangler has over 300 built-in conversions and transformations that through machine learning will automatically recognize the type of data coming in and suggest the right transformation for you to make that you can apply. You can, of course, do your own thing as well. It also makes it much easier in the Data Wrangler console to combine features to build those composite features I was mentioning. You can preview very easily these transformations in SageMaker Studio, and then if you like what you see, you simply apply that transformation to the whole data set. And Data Wrangler manages all the infrastructure and all of that work under the covers. It's a total game changer in the time that it takes to do data preparation for machine learning. Now, because you spend so much time on the data prep as well as in the feature engineering, not surprisingly, you want to use these features in lots of other models. So you need a place to store these features and make them easily accessible. And this turns out to be a hard problem. Sometimes you might step back and say, well, why is this a hard problem? Why don't you just store them in S3? The problem is you may be able to do that if you wanted to store as an object maybe a simple set of features that are mapped to one model. But features are hardly ever mapped to just one model. They're usually mapped to lots of models because they're highly useful and you did all the work to get the features in a state where the model can understand them. And then sometimes you've got subsets in that set of features that want to be their own set of features. And then you've got multiple people who want to access those features in the different sets with multiple models. And pretty quickly, it becomes really complicated and hard to keep track of, which is why people often try to keep track of this in email or spreadsheets or sometimes build a clunky UI that takes time to really work very well. You also need to, these same features need to be used to train models and then also to make predictions. And they're really different use cases. When you're training a model, you'll use all the data in a particular feature to be able to get the best model possible to make predictions. But when you're making predictions, you often will take just maybe the last 5 data points in that particular feature. But they have to be stored the same way and they've got to be accessible. And then when you're actually using these features for inference and predictions, you need really low latency because you're trying to make predictions in close to real time in your application. So it's really hard to do all of these things in a generalized store. And so that's why we have built, and I'm excited to announce today, SageMaker Feature Store, which is a new repository that makes it easy to store, update, and share machine learning features. And so the Feature Store, it is a purpose-built feature store that's accessible in SageMaker Studio, and it makes it much simpler to name, organize, find, and share features with teams because we've built a purpose-built store for features. It turns out it makes it really easy for features to actually be accessed either for training or for inference, even though they're different use cases. We've built a store that makes that simple. And because Feature Store is located in SageMaker close to where your machine learning models are running, you get really low latency on your inference and predictions. So this is another big deal for people that are trying to build machine learning models. Now, I think you can tell from understanding what happens in machine learning or looking at data preparation or Feature Store that machine learning has a lot of things that have to happen sequentially or sometimes in parallel, but really lend themselves well to orchestration and to automation. And This is true in normal code as well when you're building applications. It's why they've built these CI/CD pipelines. But in machine learning, there is no CI/CD. None of them exist pervasively. People have tried to build their own. They've tried to do it homegrown. Hasn't been that scalable, hasn't worked the way they've wanted to. And customers want an easier way to do this. And so I'm excited to announce today the launch of Amazon SageMaker Pipelines, which is a first purpose-built, easy-to-use CI/CD service for machine learning. And so with pipelines, you can quickly create machine learning workflows with our Python SDK, and then you can automate a bunch of the steps from a number of the things you have to do on data preparation and Data Wrangler, to moving the data from Data Wrangler to the feature store, to some of the activities you want to take once in the feature store, to training, to tuning, to hosting your models. You can build all of these things in a workflow that happens automatically. And then Pipelines manages all those dependencies between each of the steps and orchestrates the flow. So you can have any number of these automated steps in a pipeline workflow. We also give you pipelines with pre-configured templates for building and deploying so that you don't have to create these from scratch. You can either use those verbatim, you can use those as a base and then customize it how you see fit, or you can actually build them from scratch. You can do all those things in Pipeline. And then Pipelines automatically keeps track of all the artifacts and then keeps an audit trail of all the changes, so it's easy to troubleshoot if you need to do that. So SageMaker has completely changed the game for everyday developers and data scientists in being able to build, train, tune, and deploy machine learning models. And people have flocked to SageMaker not only because there's nothing else like it, but also because of the relentless iteration and innovation that you continue to see us applying into SageMaker. It's not just the launch of the service. You can look at what we did with SageMaker Studio last year. You can look at what we've done this year, at least what you've heard so far. There'll be more in what we've done around data preparation and feature stores and the first CI/CD in machine learning. We're not close to being done innovating here. The third ask that we often get is customers say, I would like to be able to use your machine learning, but I don't want to have to be responsible for creating the model myself. I want to send you data. I want to use models that you have built and trained on data and get the answers back via APIs. And that's what we think of as this top layer of the machine learning stack. And we have a lot of services in this area. For people that want to look at an object and say what's in this, or a video and say what's in this, we have an object and video recognition service called Rekognition. We have services that allow you to go from text to speech, to transcribe audio to text, to translate that transcribed audio, to do natural language processing on all that translated, transcribed audio so you don't have to read it all and know what's happening. It lets you do OCR, but also OCR++ and being able to pull out data from tables and formats that don't usually come out in OCR. We give you the ability to build chatbots with Lex. We give you the ability to do internal enterprise search with Kendra, which we launched last year. And then there's a bunch of Amazon capabilities that you asked us to expose as machine learning services, which we have. So we have a personalization machine learning service, and a forecasting service, and a fraud detection service, and a code inspection service called CodeGuru. And it's interesting, as you start using these models more and more, there's that point at every company where you think about how much can I trust these predictions and these answers to use in my applications. And there are certain use cases where the ramifications are low enough that you can take more chances. Oftentimes, in applications that are doing translation or transcription, if you see good results early on, you're going to really trust it as your major input. But there are other use cases where the ramifications of getting it wrong are significant enough where you're going to wait a little bit. And these are services like facial recognition or forecasting your inventory, or the quality of your code. You're going to look and make sure that you like the predictions, that they're actually high quality, and you're going to use those inputs really as one input in several inputs of a decision. So it's really machine aided in that case. And what you're going to wait for is you're going to wait for the predictions to become more and more commonplace, that you say, yes, that's the answer, and you want to see that that provider is going to continue to invest in that service so you know it's going to be robust and you can really rely on it and cut the cord from what you were doing before. Let's look at an example of this. Let's look at CodeGuru. CodeGuru is a service we launched last year, which is a machine learning service that lets you automate code reviews to tell if you have any kind of code that you've written that we think is going to lead to a problem. And it also allows you to identify your most expensive line of code. By the way, we have over 120,000 apps at Amazon that are using that profiler part to find the most expensive line of code, which not only is helping them find operational bottlenecks, but also saving them a significant amount of money. And so customers who are trying to assess, can I rely on CodeGuru as a major input in how I think about my code? They say, well, what's your commitment? I understand you got a profiler, you have a code reviewer, but how about more programming languages? So the team launched Python and a few other languages. And then they said, well, how about something around security? So the team launched a security detector feature that lets you know whether or not you have code that we believe will lead to some kind of security issue. And then people said, well, that's great. You have so much information about the way that my application operates and the way that all kinds of applications operate on AWS. Why can't you build a service using machine learning that allows us to predict when there are going to be operational problems? And so we went away and thought about that. And I'm excited to launch a new service today called Amazon DevOps Guru, which is a new service that uses machine learning to identify operational issues long before they impact customers. And so DevOps Guru makes it much easier for developers to anticipate operational issues before it bites them. And so using machine learning informed by years of Amazon and AWS operational experience and code, what we do in the service is we identify potential issues with missing or misconfigured alarms or things that are resources that are approaching resource limits or code and config changes that could cause outages or under-provisioned capacity or overutilization of databases or memory leaks. And when we find one of those that we think could lead to a problem, we will notify you either by an SNS notification or a CloudWatch event or third-party tools like Slack. And we'll also recommend a remediation. And so when you look at these top-level services and you find them super useful, as you go through this journey that you will go through as a company in determining when you can trust them as either the major or a major input in your applications, you're always going to want to get a lot of experience running them at scale and see the predictions being more and more accurate, and then also making sure that the provider that you're betting on for that service is continuing to invest in that service and make it easier and easier for you to use that as that input. I think that's what people are starting to see with CodeGuru. The fourth ask that we get is from customers who say the following: it is awesome that you have so much machine learning capability, more than I can find elsewhere, but I would like to somehow benefit from machine learning without having to even know I'm doing machine learning. Perhaps my favorite business school professor, and also perhaps the best innovation writer of our time, was a fellow named Clay Christensen. And Clay just passed away. But what Clay used to always talk about was he used to always say that customers hire products and services for a job. And in this case, what customers are telling us is, I don't want to hire you for machine learning. I want to hire you for a particular job. And if you use machine learning to get it done, great, that's fine, either way, but I want to hire you to get that job done. And let me give you a good example of that. If you look at business intelligence, or BI, of course, it started with these kind of older forms of this, like Oracle OBIEE, and then really over the last few years, Tableau's done a great job reinventing this space and building beautiful visualizations and dashboards. And we're now at a stage where BI is being reinvented again. And what people really want is they really want their BI service to be serverless, so they don't have to manage all that infrastructure. They want the ability to be able to embed all their dashboards and visualizations everywhere, easily, flexibly. And then increasingly, they want to be able to use all kinds of machine learning and natural language. Really what they want is natural language, whether machine learning fuels it or not, that allow them to understand the results more easily than having to do all the work to glean the insights themselves. And that's why we built Amazon QuickSight back in 2016. QuickSight is serverless. It's very scalable. It has not just all the features you need in a BI service, but it also does embedding better than you'll find elsewhere. And then we've started to invest in machine learning that allow you to have experiences that get things done in a much more natural way. So for instance, we have this feature in QuickSight called auto narratives. And what it means is that when you actually do a query and you get the results, you don't have to actually always do the work to figure out what the results mean. We will provide natural language what we think the key insight is. Now, we do that through machine learning, but nobody who uses QuickSight has to know anything about machine learning. And customers really love that feature. And they've said, I wish you could use that type of capability and other things that we have to do in our BI usage. So for instance, I don't like that our users have to know which databases or data stores to get the data from, or how the data is structured, or how to ask a question in a certain way, or I want them just to be able to type into a search bar a natural language question and get answers. And this is a hard problem. A lot of companies have tried to take a shot at solving this, usually with natural language query, and they just haven't been able to get good results. And it's really hard to build the right data set because there's millions of questions, and pretty quickly you find you didn't have all the questions. You got to go back to IT, and they have to build it when they get a chance. It just hasn't worked out until now. So I'm excited to announce the launch of Amazon QuickSight Q, which allows you to ask Q any question in natural language and get answers in seconds. And so the way Q works is you just type in a question in natural language in Q, in the search bar. You can ask a question like, give me the trailing 12 months sales of product X, or compare product X sales to product Y sales the last 12 weeks. And then you get an answer in seconds. That's all you have to do. You don't have to know the tables. You don't have to know the data stores. You don't have to figure out how to ask the question the right way. You just ask it the way you speak. And Q will do autofilling and spell checking so that it makes it even easier to get those queries written. Q uses very sophisticated deep learning, natural language processing, schema understanding, and semantic parsing of SQL code generation. It is not simple. However, customers don't need to know anything about that machine learning. For them, the experience is I type in natural words the way I would speak, and I get answers in seconds. By the way, we've trained those models over millions of data points, and we've also trained them over all these different vertical domains, virtually everyone you can imagine. This is going to completely change the BI experience. So again, customers didn't hire us to do machine learning here. They hired us to make it easier to ask the questions that they want business intelligence on and to get answers quickly, whether we use machine learning or not. And that's what we tried to do here with Q. So it's pretty amazing how fast machine learning is continuing to evolve. And although we have over 100,000 customers who are using our machine learning services, a lot more than you'll find anywhere else, and a much broader array of machine learning services than you'll find elsewhere, we understand that it is still very early days in machine learning, and we have a lot to invent in all four of these areas that we get asked regularly from customers. Now, we've talked about the reinvention of compute and the reinvention of data stores and the reinvention of machine learning. And I think that if you look more broadly, if you're wondering, are horizontal application areas being reinvented, or are vertical industry segments being reinvented? The answer is absolutely yes. And to kick us off on this section and to share how they're reinventing broadcasting, it's my privilege to bring to the stage the CTO and President of Digital for Fox, Paul Cheesbrook.
Through our partnership with AWS, we've combined best-of-breed infrastructure with leading-edge media operations. Production teams who are more distributed than ever before will be able to deliver uncompressed video through and from the cloud with full redundancy, which is an industry first. We'll be able to produce live events with less latency, increased reliability, and more efficiently than ever before. This collaboration has resulted in the development of entirely new services. Working with AWS, we've reinvented how we produce and distribute content to our consumers across all platforms and devices using the cloud. We've transformed our existing operation, but more importantly, we've laid the tracks for the future in a way that will help us innovate and adapt for many years to come.
Thank you, Paul. We love working with Paul and his team. They are unafraid of leaning forward and inventing. They have built a real reinvention culture, and it's remarkable to see the way that they are reinventing broadcasting as we speak. Very honored to be partnered with them. One of the questions that we get asked most from venture capital companies and private equity companies is, which areas do you think are going to be reinvented? Which application areas, which vertical business segments, what's going to get reinvented? And the answer we give is often unsatisfying because in our opinion, the answer is all of them. And that's true in every single area. I think you're seeing it happening today, and those that you're not seeing it happening yet, you will see it in the next few years. And so let's start with horizontal application areas, and let's start with an example. Let's look at call centers. So if you look at call center solutions the last 20 to 30 years, people have not liked these solutions very much. They've been hard to set up. They've required expensive consultants and lots of hours. If you needed to change anything, it required complicated code. They were hard to scale up and down. They're expensive. And they're missing the two most transformational technology advances of the last 15 years, which is cloud and machine learning. Now, we learned this firsthand at Amazon, where we had to build our own call center solution to handle our retail business. And we had a lot of AWS customers who said, why don't you just generalize that and expose it to us as a service? And that's why we built Amazon Connect, which is our call center service, which we built in 2017. And people love this service. It's one of the fastest growing services in the history of AWS. And the reason they love it is that it's easy to set up. It takes minutes instead of outside consultants and lots of money. It's easy to scale up or down agents. It's much more cost effective because you only pay for what you consume, and you're only paying for when your agents are interacting with customers. There's no infrastructure for you to deploy, and then it's built right from the get-go on top of the cloud and with a lot of machine learning and AI embedded, so you could do things like chatbots and IVR and transcription of audio and sentiment analysis without having to worry about the machine learning at all. And Connect is growing really rapidly. You see thousands and thousands of customers are using it. Companies like Capital One and Intuit, John Hancock and GE and Petco and Barclays and State Farm. And what's also interesting is during the pandemic, over 5,000 new companies, new Connect customers have started using the service where they spun up call centers remotely to help them deal with the fact that all their customer service agents were now remote. And so this is another one of those services that's growing unbelievably quickly, and people are excited about and giving us all sorts of input on what else they would like to see us solve with the service. And so I'm going to share a few of their asks across 3 categories and 5 different feature ideas. And the first is really around how can we make it easier for our customer service agents to have the right information about products and customers right in the moment, in real time, when they're dealing with customers. And the problem is an interesting challenge. When customers call in about something, a service or product, you have all this information that lives in all these different databases, some on premises and first party, and some of which are third party, where you have your agents trying to access and toggle between different databases and find the right information, which is slow or they don't do it at all. Same thing happens when you have customers who interact with you across lots of different silos in your business and different databases, either first party or third party. And so customers said, can you make it much easier for us to have the right product information and customer information for our agents to have that fast, holistic service? So I have 2 new features to announce here for Connect to help with this problem. The first is Amazon Connect Wisdom, which is a new capability that uses machine learning to deliver agents the product and services information they need to solve issues in real time. So Wisdom has all of these built-in connectors to relevant knowledge repositories, either your own or to some third-party ones. We'll start with having connectors to Salesforce and ServiceNow, but there will be more coming. And then what Wisdom lets you do is that as a call is happening, Wisdom is using machine learning to listen to that call transcription and then, from Contact Lens, and then detect issues that are happening and put the right information in front of agents. So for instance, if you have a call and Wisdom hears arrived broken, it will search all the relevant data repositories for the information that you need around what to do when you have product that arrives broken. So the agents have it right there in front of them automatically, right in their console. That's a game changer. And if it turns out that you don't get the right recommendation or you want to get more information, agents can also just type in natural language questions into the Wisdom search bar, which pulls all the information across all those databases. So this totally changes what information you have available to you, product and service-wise for your agents. And then for trying to figure out how to provide a more holistic customer experience and pull together all the customer profile information, I'm excited to share a second feature, which is the launch of Amazon Connect Customer Profiles, which gives agents a unified profile of each customer to provide a more personalized service during a call. So here's how Customer Profiles works. You will point customer profiles at your internal databases, or again, at third-party databases. We'll launch customer profiles with your being able to access your information in Salesforce and Zendesk, ServiceNow, and Marketo. And then when the call comes, Customer Profiles connects that phone number or contact ID with a customer ID that's used consistently across all of those data stores. And so Customer Profiles knows how to ingest and normalize that data around customer contact history or e-commerce status or order management or marketing communications you've sent or sales or CRM information. And they know how to display it in a concerted, organized way so all of it appears in front of an agent's screen. And so take a simple example. Let's say you're a hotel company that's using Connect. And let's say you have a customer who calls in who's unhappy about a stay they had the prior night. You might handle that call differently if you also knew that that same customer had called you earlier in the week for their company to ask for a quote to do a 5-day offsite at that hotel. You might have a different conversation. Today, agents don't have access to that information. With Customer Profiles, all that information is there for agents to use at the same time and changes how they can have holistic customer interactions. Very, very useful. The next category of asks we get around Connect is, how can I make it easier that when I have a customer contact or a call that's going off the rails, how can I intercept that before the call is done and before I have a bad experience for the brand? And you may remember that last year we launched a service in Connect called Contact Lens, which is a call analytics service. And what Contact Lens does is it stores all your calls in S3, and then it transcribes it to text, and then it indexes and tags that information so it makes it easy to search and find. And then it gives people the ability, agents or managers, the ability to have full text transcriptions of those calls, to be able to understand when there was negative sentiment, or when there were long lapses in conversation, or people were raising their voice or talking over each other. And so totally changes your knowledge and information about how these contacts went. And customers have loved Contact Lens, and they've used it very pervasively. But a number of our customers and the supervisors of these customers have said, look, I wish I had the chance to know in real time when a call was going awry, because I could either coach that agent in real time or have it moved to me to avoid any brand harm. And so the team has worked on this for the last year, And I'm excited to announce the launch of Real-Time Contact Lens, which identifies issues in real time to impact customer interactions during the call itself. And so Real-Time Contact Lens uses more developed machine learning to do natural language processing on audio calls in real time, instead of waiting a few minutes after the call ends and the data and the speech is transcribed to text. They do it in real time. This is not easy to do, which is why it took the team a year to do it. And it's a good example of not only being able to leverage AWS's machine learning expertise, but again, being able to use machine learning where it's working for you under the covers, where you don't actually have to worry about it all. The job you're trying to get done is you want to be able to have an impact on calls in real time. And so what managers do who are using Real-Time Contact Lens is they specify terms where they want to be alerted. So they may say, if in the transcript I hear bad experience or unhappy or never using you again, when that criteria is met, it sends an alert in the Contact Lens dashboard to supervisors, and they can either choose to coach agents real time or have the call transferred to them. And if the call is transferred to them, they also get the real-time transcription of that call right in front of them, so they don't have to ask customers all the same questions, which is frustrating for those customers. So again, a really big deal for people who are doing customer service. If you can know when a call is going awry in real time and help that customer have a better experience and not do harm to your brand, that's a big deal. The third category that we get people asking us for help in is, how can I further optimize my agent's time in various areas? And the two areas that they ask are, first, they say, look, about half of my time for agents is spent on doing tasks outside of calls. You know, you might have to file an insurance claim for a customer. You may need to contact the customer for a status change. Half of their time is spent on these tasks. These tasks live everywhere. They're not organized in any one central place. It's hard to prioritize them. They're kept on pieces of paper. It's why oftentimes people lose them. This is a big problem. The other thing that people ask to optimize agents' time is they say, look, at the beginning of a lot of these calls, our agents have to spend time manually authenticating customers and asking all these manual questions, and it wastes a lot of time for agents, it wastes a lot of time for customers. Can you help with that? And so we have two solutions here to help you with these problems. The first is the launch of Amazon Connect Tasks, which automates, tracks, and manages tasks for contact center agents. And so tasks make it much easier to be able to manage tasks. Now you have one central place to see where an agent can see all of their tasks. Managers and supervisors get that same view. Managers can easily assign the tasks there. They can choose to prioritize in what order they want what agent to get each task done. They can actually decide to assign agents tasks based on how busy they are and whether they're on the phone or not. And then agents have everything right in front of them. And the nice thing also is that both agents and supervisors can automate a number of elements of tasks to make it even faster for them to get these things done. So this is very useful. This is going to change the efficiency of agents when they're not on calls. People are very excited about this. And then for the call authentication issue, I'm excited to share with you the launch of Amazon Connect Voice ID, which is a real-time caller authentication using machine learning-powered voice analysis. And so the way that Voice ID works is that if you're using it, you'll ask whether customers want to opt into it so that they can have a better chance of avoiding fraud and also so they can save time in their calls. If they opt in, then they say a few sentences, and we build effectively a voice print for each customer. And then when a caller calls in, we will just allow them to start talking. They'll start talking about what they're calling in for and what their problem is. Within a few seconds, Voice ID will return to you who they think that customer is and with a confidence level of that prediction. Each company will set their own threshold, but if it meets that threshold, you just continue having that call. You know there's no chance of fraud. You don't waste all that time on the manual questions. And if it's under that threshold that the company set, then either you can choose to do manual verification or transfer that call to a fraud specialist. But again, totally changes the efficiency and the productivity both for agents as well as for customers who are calling in. And so if you think about it, call centers and call center solutions existed a certain way for a long time. And even though customers didn't like them, what happened was they left this area ripe for reinvention. And when you have an opportunity to reimagine an area, an experience like call center, and you find a way to make it easy to get started and easy to scale and much more cost effective, and you build capabilities that put all the relevant information about products and customers in front of agents so they can handle those in real time. And when you allow agents to be more productive with their tasks outside of calls, and you allow them to actually start calls much quicker, and then you allow them to use machine learning under the covers to do things like have the ability to impact calls in real time before there's any harm done to a brand. When you do all those types of things, you can completely transform any horizontal application space as we have with Connect. Every single one of these horizontal application spaces have the ability to be reinvented and will be reinvented in the next number of years. How about vertical business segments? Which of these are being reinvented? And the answer is all of them. And I'm going to give you a few examples. If you look in the auto space, this may be the space that has the most elements of reinvention happening simultaneously. But you have the electrification of cars, which is partially driven by the environment, partially driven by companies that came up right from the get-go as electric-only companies like what Rivian has done on top of AWS. You have companies who are working in building autonomous vehicles. We do a lot of work with BMW and Lyft on these, but virtually every company is working on this. The car gives you a chance to have all these new connected experiences that weren't really thought of many years ago, and we've been working with companies like Toyota on this, but even today, you may or may not have seen the announcement we just made with BlackBerry, where they have built a new intelligent vehicle data platform that they call IVY on top of AWS, where they basically took their QNX software that does sensor management and that runs in 175 million vehicles that are on the road. And then what they've done is they've helped automakers better access, process, analyze, and share data from those connected vehicle sensors to build brand new experiences for car owners or drivers or passengers. So auto is transforming in a rapid way. Same thing with healthcare. Healthcare companies will tell you that the holy grail for them is to be able to take all these disparate pieces of information that live in all these different formats so they have a 360-degree view of customers. And they're not there yet, although we'll have more to say on this and to help with this in the next couple weeks. But they're not there yet, but they are making progress, and they're using machine learning to solve problems that they couldn't solve before. So a good example is, look at what Moderna has done in the last year or so, last 9 months. They built an entire digital manufacturing suite on top of AWS to sequence their most recent COVID-19 candidate that they just submitted and has 94% effectiveness. And they did it on AWS in 42 days instead of the typical 20 months it takes. Just think about that. Think about what it changes with regard to what's possible in healthcare if you're able to take actions that are so momentous like that much more quickly and much more easily. You see the same type of invention happening in media and entertainment. I think most people here know that the way that we have started streaming and allowing consumers to use video content has radically changed the last 5 years. And if you look at all the major streaming services, Netflix and Disney Plus and Hulu and Prime Video, they all use AWS to do that. But you're also seeing really audacious new inventions like what Paul was talking about with Fox and Viacom CBS are trying the same type of thing, which is completely reinventing how they do broadcast and the ease and speed with which they can spin up brand new channels for people. And then you see the same thing happening in industrial manufacturing, where they are using edge and the data to rethink all their design processes on the production line, thinking about how to change their supply chains and to change their products. And a company that's a great example of this, which is totally reinventing themselves on top of AWS, is my next guest. It's a privilege to welcome the president and CEO of Carrier, Dave Gitlin.
Thank you, Andy. I am honored to be with you today. Like Amazon, Carrier is a company founded on innovation. Willis Carrier invented modern air conditioning at the age of 25 back in 1902, and it changed the way we live. Innovation is in our DNA, and it's embedded in what we call the Carrier way. With a laser focus on customers' innovation and agility, we introduce more than 100 new products a year. And that kind of relentless customer focus and quick execution is what Amazon calls day one. We literally just had our day one when we became a public company on April 3rd, following our spin from United Technologies, and it has been so energizing. We think of ourselves as a 100-year-old startup, and our focus is clear: to be the world leader in healthy, safe, and sustainable building and cold chain solutions. On the building side, COVID has shined a light on the criticality of health and safety, and we are leading the way to ensure healthy buildings and safe indoor air environments. But today, I'm going to focus on our other ecosystem, and that's the cold chain, and our transformative alliance with AWS. So let me start with the problem statement. The safe distribution of many foods and pharmaceuticals requires uninterrupted cooling from inception to destination. Maintaining precise cooling conditions is more difficult than it sounds because many foods and pharmaceuticals can travel thousands of miles through a complex refrigerated distribution network called the cold chain. So consider a banana. Bananas are the most consumed fruit on Earth and are extremely temperature sensitive. Once harvested, that clock starts ticking. Within hours, bananas must be cooled and maintained between 56 and 58 degrees Fahrenheit with relative humidity between 90 and 95%. Even a 1-degree temperature variation during that refrigerated journey can cause damage, which doesn't show up until arrival at the supermarket. So consider the 2 to 3 week journey of a banana from, say, Ecuador to the United States. It starts at the farm. There, bananas are packed into a non-cooled cardboard box. They are then put into a series of refrigerated environments, starting with the cold room on the farm, to a truck, to an ocean container, shipped over the ocean, then onto a trailer to a distribution center, onto another truck to a ripening facility, to yet another truck to the grocery store. Each of these handoffs from one refrigerated environment to another occurs at outside temperature, and there is no margin for error. And today, there is no central repository for the temperature data for the entire journey. So now it's not surprising to learn that 1/3 of the world's food produced every day is never consumed due to waste, loss, or damage. Imagine that. Food waste costs the global economy nearly $1 trillion. But here's what's even more tragic. 1 in 9 people go to bed hungry every night. If we could eliminate all of the cold chain challenges, we'd preserve enough food to feed 950 million people. That's more than all of the hungry people in the world today. Think about the impact on the planet. Consider all of the resources and resulting emissions that go into producing food that never gets consumed. If food waste were a country, it would be the 3rd largest emitter of greenhouse gases. It's tragic on a human level, an environmental level, and a financial level. And the same problem exists with pharmaceuticals. They must be kept cold within very strict standards from the time the active pharmaceutical ingredient is first manufactured through a series of handoffs spanning ocean, air, warehouses, trailers, vans, freezers, and then temperature-sensitive medications must then be administered within hours of hitting room temperature. Today, we lose $35 billion in biopharma each year from temperature-controlled logistics failures. It's a challenging problem in normal times, but an unprecedented challenge with the COVID vaccine. So now let's talk solutions. We at Carrier are a global leader in providing equipment that cools containers, trucks, trailers, temporary remote storage, and cabinets. We also provide sensors that track temperature, location, and cargo condition. AWS has the world's most widely adopted cloud platform with the broadest and deepest set of services. Together, we are going to transform how perishable food and pharmaceuticals are protected through a new offering that we've developed called Lynx. You can think of Lynx as an end-to-end digital connected platform for the cold chain. we will use AWS's IoT, analytics, and ML services to help customers reduce food and medicine loss, optimize supply chain logistics, and enhance environmental sustainability. Where data was previously siloed, we'll now be able to aggregate temperature data across the product's entire journey onto a data lake, say from the time the banana is first cooled on the farm to when it arrives in the supermarket. And we can use AWS ML capabilities to provide faster, smarter, actionable intelligence to better manage the cold chain and prevent breakpoints. With AWS ML services, for example, we could learn that truck doors should not be left open longer than a half hour when loading or unloading cargo. With AWS ML services, we can determine if a container has to be pre-cooled to 56 degrees and then use position location to initiate the pre-cooling process. We could also use weather data to detect and avoid transportation delays, and then use updated arrival times to alert the supermarket to a delay so they can then adjust their produce displays. The data can also be used for equipment health, to remotely diagnose a compressor issue while the container is at sea, or better yet, use AWS IoT and analytics to help anticipate when a unit will fail so we can then perform preventative maintenance. And we could also optimize logistics by combining truck positioning data with traffic and weather to help a distribution company improve fuel consumption and fleet uptime. All of this helping food and pharmaceuticals get to where they are needed, when they are needed, and in the conditions that they are needed. So, exciting times for us here at Carrier. With AWS, we will be addressing profound issues like hunger, climate change, and safe vaccine distribution. And we could not be more excited to be on this journey with our friends at AWS. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. It is really impressive what Carrier is doing, and really important, particularly at this time. And as we said earlier, the keys to reinventing is a combination of building the right reinvention culture and then knowing what technology is available to you to make that reinvention change and using it. And that's exactly what Carrier is leveraging. It's very important, very impressive. So manufacturing and industrial companies are a group of customers who have said to us, we know that we could change our customer experience and how we operate our plants so significantly using machine learning, but we just don't often have the equipment or the talent to make that happen. And I really wish you, AWS, would help us. And so let me give you a couple examples. If you look at machine data, there are a lot of industrial companies who know that if they could do predictive maintenance better, they could save a lot of money and time. And what manufacturing companies will tell you is that it's always much less expensive to fix something before it breaks, not to mention saving the money of the downtime in the plant. But it's actually not that easy to tell. Most people in a plant will tell you that you can hear it or you can feel it through the vibration before you can see it. But a lot of companies either don't have sensors, or they're not modern and powerful sensors, or not consistent, and they don't know how to take that data from the sensors and send it to the cloud, and they don't know how to build machine learning models. And our manufacturing companies that we work with have said, could you just solve this? Can you build an end-to-end solution? So I'm excited to announce today the launch of Amazon Monitron, which is an end-to-end solution for equipment monitoring. And so Monitron gives customers sensors, a gateway device to send the data to AWS. We build custom machine learning models for you, and a mobile app with a UI so you can tell what's happening. And all our customers do is you mount the sensors to your equipment, you start sending the data through the gateway device, and then as we take the data in, we build a machine learning model that looks at what normal looks like for you on sound or vibration. And then as you continue to stream that data to us, we will use the model to show you where there are anomalies and send that back to you in the mobile app so you can tell where you might need to do predictive maintenance. That's a big deal. That makes it much, much easier for companies to do. Now, there are other companies who say, look, I have modern sensors that I'm fine with. I'm also okay taking the data from those sensors and sending it to AWS, but I don't want to build the machine learning models. I just want to send you the data. use your models and have the data come, the predictions come back to me through the APIs, that third layer of that machine learning stack. And so we have something for this group of customers as well to announce today, which is the launch of Amazon Lookout for Equipment, which does anomaly detection for industrial machinery. And so with Lookout for Equipment, you just send the data to S3, or we have a service called IoT Sitewise that lets you send your machine data in a structured way for analytics. You send the data to AWS. We will assess sound, vibration, temperature, and we'll again build a model what normal looks like. And as we see anomalies, we'll send them to you via the API so that you can do predictive maintenance. These are game changers for industrial companies that want to be doing predictive maintenance and saving money. Then the second problem they asked to help with was computer vision. And if you think about it, there are a lot of split decisions that you've got to make in facilities on your production lines, or even interactions between people when you're trying to be socially distanced, where you just don't have the time to send that information to the cloud and get an answer back. You need to make that decision in real time. So what these industrial companies need and often try to employ in some fashion are cameras, these smart cameras that allow them to do streaming video. But the problem is that most of the smart cameras out there today are just not powerful enough to run sophisticated computer vision models at the edge. And most companies that you talk to, they don't want to rip out all their cameras that they have installed, but they know they need to give help to those cameras to be able to do computer vision in a sophisticated way. And they asked us if we would try to help with that. And so I'm excited to announce today the launch of the AWS Panorama appliance, which is a new hardware appliance that allows organizations to add computer vision to existing on-premises smart cameras. So here's how it works. You simply plug in the Panorama appliance and connect it to your network, and Panorama starts to recognize and pick up video streams from your other cameras in the facility. The Panorama appliance can accept streams of up to 20 concurrent streams and operate on those. If you need to have more concurrently, you can buy more Panorama appliances. And then we have pre-built models inside of Panorama that do computer vision for you, and that we've optimized by industry. So we've got them in manufacturing and construction and retail and a host of others. You can, of course, choose not to use the pre-built models and build your own in SageMaker, and then just deploy those to Panorama. And then Panorama also integrates seamlessly with the rest of the AWS IoT and machine learning services, where if you actually want to send that data, not for real-time actions, but to do large-scale analytics on what's happening in the plant, you can send them to us through Panorama, and you can use it in the rest of your AWS regions. Now, this is pretty exciting, and the people are pretty excited about the possibility of having real computer vision there. But they also have told us that, look, we're going to buy the next generation of smart cameras. And those smart camera manufacturers have told us, we want to actually embed something that allows us to run more powerful computer vision models in there. So we're also providing a brand new AWS Panorama SDK, which enables hardware vendors to build new cameras that run more meaningful computer vision models at the edge. And so what this will do is, if you are a company that runs cameras and you're building the next generation of cameras, you'll be able to use this SDK and the APIs associated with it. We've done all this work to optimize the parameters around memory and latency so you can actually, in the camera, fit more powerful models in a more constrained space. And it's going to change what's available for companies as they're building smart cameras moving forward. If you're an industrial company and you've built a culture that's able to reinvent, if you use these tools I just talked about, along with a host of others that AWS provides, you can totally reinvent what you are doing in your industrial manufacturing company, much like Carrier has. And the reality is that this is true and available to every single company in every vertical business segment. That reinvention is there for you. If you're ready, we have a lot for you, with a lot more coming. So the final area of reinvention that I'm going to talk about today is really around hybrid infrastructure. And I'm going to yield the floor to the head of infrastructure at Riot Games, Zach Blitz.
With Outposts, AWS gave us a unique solution to ensure a level playing field for our players and streamlined our deployments using the same tools and APIs on premises and in the cloud. We rolled out Valorant fast and efficiently, and we are continuing to reinvent how we design and deploy our games to provide our players with the best possible game experience. We shipped AWS Outposts to new colos quickly, enabling a rapid deployment of game servers standardized on a single build, test, and production pipeline. And best of all, using AWS Outposts, we reduced latency for players by 10 to 20 milliseconds, minimizing peakers' advantage and creating a level playing field for all players.
Thank you, Zach. Appreciate it, Zach. It's very impressive to continue to see the way that Riot is innovating for their players, and it's also impressive to see how they're using AWS in regions as well as on premises in a seamless and consistent way. When you think about the term hybrid and hybrid infrastructure, I think a lot of people believe that this term and these solutions are pretty set. But in our very strong opinion, both the definition of the term and the solutions themselves are innovating and being reinvented really quickly. When people ask what's hybrid, typically people view it as a mix of modes. And people define it early on as a combination of cloud alongside on-premises data centers. And one of the reasons it was defined that way is the people who popularized this term were on-premises infrastructure product providers, and they wanted to ride along with the momentum of the cloud. So that's how the definition started off, which was cloud and on-premises data centers. And it led to all of this breathless debate about whether this was going to turn out to be a binary situation. Would you only use the cloud or only use on-premises? And we probably contributed a little bit to that confusion because we stated our then very strong belief and now even stronger belief that the vast majority of companies in the fullness of time will not have their own data centers. And those that do will have much smaller footprints. But we always thought that was going to happen in the fullness of time, not this year. And we knew that would take several years. And so we just spent a lot of our time in the early years of AWS on the cloud-specific pieces and then building sensible bridges back to on-premises data centers. And these are things like virtual private clouds or VPCs or Direct Connect or Storage Gateway. But in the meantime, you had a number of companies who tried to jump on owning what hybrid was and built all of these hugely hyped capabilities that were supposed to be hybrid capabilities that never lived up to the hype and really never got any traction. And so we were watching this happening, and we went back to first principles and we asked ourselves, so wait a second, what really is hybrid? So it's cloud and on-premises. Well, what does on-premises mean? Is it just on-premises data centers? What about a restaurant? Is that on-premises? What about an agricultural field? Is that on-premises? If those are on-premises, they have very different requirements than on-premises data centers. And so we think of hybrid infrastructure as including the cloud along with various other edge nodes, on-premises data centers being one of them, but there are several of them. And the way that customers have told us they want to consume our hybrid offering is with the same APIs, the same control plane, the same tools, and the same hardware that they're used to using in AWS regions. Effectively, they want us to distribute AWS to these various edge nodes. So we reimagined for ourselves what hybrid was, and we started to build solutions that picked off the biggest use cases, but in a way that worked for customers both short and long term. And so we started with customers said, look, I want to be able to use the same tools I've used to manage my infrastructure on premises for the last number of years. I want to use that in the cloud. I want to use it to manage my cloud deployment. Most of the world at this point has virtualized on top of VMware. So we started working with Pat Gelsinger and the VMware team on how to build a new offering, which is called VMware Cloud and AWS, that allows customers to use those VMware tools they've been using for many years to manage their on-premises infrastructure and manage their infrastructure on AWS. And this is a very unusual collaboration. It's really There's no other managed service that VMware runs with another cloud provider. There's none that have the functionality and capability of this VMware Cloud and AWS. It's not just that both VMware and AWS have its engineering teams and its product teams closely tied at the hip, but also our field teams and our partner teams work together with customers. It's a very unusual partnership, and it's gaining a lot of momentum and a lot of steam. And you can see there are a lot of customers, whether you're talking about S&P Global or Penny Mac or Johnson & Johnson or Philips or Palantir, Scottish Government, lots of customers are using VMware Cloud and AWS. And you also see the growth, just almost double the amount of nodes year over year. There's IDC just had a report that showed over 5 years you get a 500% return on investment. There's a lot of momentum in VMware Cloud and AWS, and it's really, really handy as you're moving from on-premises infrastructure to the cloud. Then a lot of our customers said, well, that is awesome, that is very useful, but what about when I need to keep workloads on premises for the foreseeable future? Maybe they need to be close to a factory or something that lives near my data centers, but I want to use AWS there, right on premises. And so there were a number of companies that tried to solve this solution, none of which have gotten any traction. And we tried to go to school on what wasn't working. And what customers hated about those solutions was it didn't have the same APIs or tools or control plane or hardware. They were totally different. It was too much work, and they weren't doing it because it was too much friction. And so we changed how we thought about what people wanted there, and we changed our mindset to realizing what they really wanted was they wanted us to distribute AWS to the on-premises locations and nodes. And so that's why we built Outposts, which we announced 2 years ago and launched last year, which effectively rolls in racks of AWS services. You've got compute, storage, and database, and analytics, and soon machine learning. It's fully managed. We deliver it. We'll install it. We'll do all the maintenance. And it comes with the same APIs, the same control plane, the same tools, and the same hardware. People are very excited about Outposts. In a short amount of time, we have thousands of customers using them. These are customers like Philips and Volkswagen and Ericsson, Lockheed Martin, T-Systems, and Toyota. Just loads of companies who are using these services and using Outposts and very excited about it. And so customers said, well, I love Outposts, and they really work well in my on-premises data centers, but they're big racks. What if I want to use Outposts in a much smaller space where I can't afford to have racks? I don't have the space. I need servers. And so I'm excited to announce today 2 new formats of Outposts. Smaller Outposts that let you run AWS infrastructure in locations with less space. And said, so instead of these big rack solutions, these are server solutions for Outposts. So the first size is what we call a 1U size, which is 1 3/4 inches tall, kind of the size of a pizza box. It's a 40th of the size of the bigger rack Outposts that we launched a year ago. And then we have a 2U size, which is 3.5 inches tall, which is almost like 2 pizza boxes stacked. And these 2 smaller Outpost formats have the same functionality as Outposts, just for a smaller space. And now it means that restaurants or hospitals or retail stores or factories can use Outposts to have AWS distributed to that edge. Then customers said, okay, that's really cool. I can have Outposts on-premises data centers or into much smaller spaces. How about the use case where I need AWS distributed in major metropolitan areas where it may not be cost effective either for you, AWS, or me, the customer, to have a data center there, but I'd be willing to pay a little extra in exchange for my most demanding low latency applications being able to reside in major metropolitan areas. And that's why we built and announced last year AWS Local Zones. We started with the first one in Los Angeles, aimed at the filmmakers and graphics renderers and gaming companies. And I'm excited to announce today we have 3 new local zones that are launching today in Boston, in Houston, and in Miami, and then 12 more in the United States in 2021. In Atlanta, Chicago, Dallas, Denver, Kansas City, Las Vegas, Minneapolis, New York, Philadelphia, Phoenix, Portland, and Seattle. I don't know if you're applauding because you're excited about the local zones or that I remembered all 12 of those. But we're excited about it, and we think it's going to help you deploy AWS to those metropolitan city edges. What about when I actually need AWS distributed to the edge where there's no connectivity or where the terrain is so rugged that I need something that can be banged around a little bit? This might be in an agricultural field or an oil field or a military battlefield. And for this, we built our Snow family of products, so Snowball Edge and Snow Cone, which are different sizes, but both are hardware appliances that you can bring to that disconnected edge. It stores data that's running off the different assets that you have at the edge. It has compute on it, so you can do some analytics and processing on it. And then, if at any point you want to actually detach that appliance and send it back to us to have us ingest it in our data centers so that you can do large-scale analytics, you can do that as well. How about distributing AWS if I want to build mobile applications and I want to take advantage of 5G? And people are very excited about 5G because the latency and the power of it give you a chance to build sub-10 millisecond latency applications that can do things like smart manufacturing or autonomous vehicles or various things in games. But any application that wants to do anything interesting is going to need compute. It's going to need storage, it's going to need infrastructure. And the problem is, for mobile applications to leverage that infrastructure, which is typically AWS, they have to go from the device to the mobile network, to the local aggregation location, to the regional aggregation location, to the internet, to AWS and back. And that's not 10 milliseconds, that's seconds. And so customers wanted a way to change that. And that's why we announced last year the launch of what we built called AWS Wavelength, which extends AWS infrastructure to the 5G edge. So that now you only have to go from the device to the Metro 5G aggregation site, and AWS has racks of outposts right there for you to do your infrastructure. We launched this last year with Verizon, who's been an amazing partner. We already have 8 US cities that we've launched, with more coming in the coming weeks. We're launching with KDDI in Tokyo and SK Telecom in South Korea in the next few weeks, and then with Vodafone in London in early 2021. And one of the problems that we also thought about and solved that customers asked about was they said, look, there are all these different telco providers. They all have different semantics. I don't have to learn all of those. Can you build an abstraction so I'm just writing to a wavelength zone, and then you do all the, the normalizing under the covers, which is what we've done. So there are a lot of ways of being able to bring the AWS experience to customers wherever they are. And so when you go back to asking what is hybrid, it's not just cloud and on-premises data centers. It's cloud along with various edge nodes, on-premises data centers being one of them, but several others. And we think most of this computing will end up in the cloud over time, which will be like the hub, just given the cost and the agility and functionality and productivity advantages for builders. But several other workloads will reside where it makes most sense. You'll have on-premises data centers when you're doing this transition from on-premises to the cloud and where they need to be close to something that lives near an on-premises data center. You'll have them in various smaller venues when you want them in a restaurant or in a hospital or in a factory. You'll have them in major metropolitan areas where you have your most demanding low latency workloads, where you're willing to pay a little bit extra to have that low latency. You'll be able to have them in the disconnected edge, and you'll be able to have AWS as well when you're building 5G mobile applications that need to sit at the 5G mobile edge. And people will want this hybrid experience to be delivered by AWS by distributing AWS to these edge nodes with the same APIs, the same control plane, the same tools, and the same hardware they get in AWS regions. That's where we believe hybrid is headed and how we're trying to enable it. So I'm going to close with a song lyric, and because of COVID and the way we did this virtually, we didn't have the band this year, but I'm going to use a song lyric to try and bring us home. And the lyric says, I wish I could Google my ending, Someone give me reassurance, answers, anything will do. And this is from one of my very favorite songwriters. And what she was talking about was really the uncertainty of being a young adult and what's going to happen. But I think that same message is really applicable to companies and what's going to happen in the future. If you're a missionary and you're focused on building a lasting company versus making a quick buck and being a mercenary, you know how hard it is to build a sustainable business. So many things can derail you. New technology, new competitors, losing leaders, losing key contributors, regulation, pandemics. There are a lot of things. And like for a young person wondering what the future holds for them, the same is true for companies. It's daunting. And I think the same counsel applies. You can't control for every change and every development, but you can build the capacity to get to the truth, to make changes when they're needed, to have people around you who want to help you change and can help you make the change, to stay focused on what matters most, to move fast when speed is required, which is more often than you realize, and then to be aware of what's available to you and what's changing around you so you can reinvent who you are and what your customer experience will be. That's what you need for reinvention. And in my opinion, companies who aren't already reinventing themselves in some meaningful way are unwinding, whether they realize it or not. The good news, though, is that invention and reinvention is very doable if you're intentional and focused on it. And we'll be here every step of the way to help you do it. I want to thank you for listening. I hope everybody stays safe, and I hope you have a great few weeks of reInvent. Thank you very much.